Chapter 1162. Song Yu lay straight on the ground and finished his life. The others were immersed in complex emotions. The sword slaves knelt on the ground, their faces ashen. They were very clear about what was waiting for them. Death. Although the sword slaves were the elites of the sword, they were not afraid of death. Xiao Xiaoling wiped away his tears, stood up, and walked to the front of Song Yu, looking down at his corpse. Song Yu's eyes were wide open, but he had lost his vitality. Xiao Xiaoling really wanted to tear Song Yu into pieces, but seeing that he was dead, this idea disappeared. You are worse than a beast, but I am not. Since you are dead, then Master's revenge will be avenged. Xiao Xiaoling said coldly. Tang Zheng looked at Xiao Xiaoling with relief. He didn't completely lose himself because of hatred, which made him appreciate it very much. How do we deal with these people? Yi Dingdang also put away her emotions, pointed to the sword slave and asked. The sword slave looked at Tang Zheng nervously, his eyes full of pleading. Tang Zheng didn't pay attention to it at all, but looked at Xiao Xiaoling. Xiao Xiaoling turned his head and looked at Tang Zheng. He said, "Young Master Tang, can I ask you a presumptuous request?" "What's the matter?" Xiao Xiaoling looked at the sword slave deeply and said, "I hope young Master Tang will let them live. Although these people help the tyrant and are with Song Yu, they are swordsmen after all. I don't want my hands to be stained with the blood of my fellow disciples." These words were full of sincere feelings. Tang Zheng couldn't help but look at Xiao Xiaoling with admiration. In the past, he was a killer who killed without blinking. Unexpectedly, he had such a kind side. This was completely different from his original image, which was amazing. Tang Zheng didn't express his opinion, but asked, "But they just wanted to kill you." "That's because of Song Yu's bewitchment. Now that Song Yu is dead, let's put an end to everything." Tang Zheng secretly nodded, and finally glanced at the sword slave whose eyes were full of expectation and pleading. He said, "You have a big life, and Xiao Xiaoling is pleading for you. Otherwise, I will not let you go just because you are helping the tyrant and are in cahoots with Song Yu." The sword servant was overjoyed at the unexpected good news as he continuously bowed to Tang Zheng in thanks. "You don't have to thank me. The one who should be thanked is him." Tang Zheng pointed to Xiao Xiaoling and said. The sword slaves thanked Xiao Xiao one after another. They couldn't see the situation of life and death just now. "Xiao Xiaoling, you are the disciple of the sword god. Naturally, you don't want the inheritance of the sword to be interrupted. So, I suggest you lead these people to rebuild the sword." Tang Zheng finished speaking. His big hand pulled Song Yu's body through the air. With a whoosh, a sword manual flew into his hand. On it were the words "Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall." This is the Ninth Heaven Galaxy Fall sword technique. It is the heart and soul of the sword god. I hope it will be carried forward in your hands. Tang Zheng threw the sword manual into Xiao Xiaoling's hand. He caught the sword manual in a daze, at a loss. Of course, he understood the importance of this sword manual. "Don't waste my efforts," Tang Zheng warned. "But Xiao Xiaoling subconsciously wanted to refuse. After all, he used to be a sword disciple. If he held the sword, it would definitely cause others to criticize him. Pedantic. Tang Zheng sighed and winked at the sword slave. There were many shrewd people among the sword slaves. They actually understood Tang Zheng's meaning. They bowed to Xiao Xiaoling and shouted, "Please hold the sword." The other servants also woke up from a dream and bowed down, "Please hold the sword." Xiao Xiaoling couldn't understand Tang Zheng's intentions. He looked at him gratefully. His mood fluctuated. He couldn't help but be deeply impressed by Tang Zheng. In the past, he surrendered to Tang Zheng because of his own promise, not out of sincerity. But from this moment onwards, his attitude towards Tang Zheng underwent a 180-degree change, as he sincerely pledged his allegiance to him. "Thank you." He bowed deeply towards Tang Zheng and said to the sword slaves kneeling on the ground, "All of you, get up." Boom. "Thank you. The sword's breath will continue in the hands of Xiao Xiaoling." Boom. Suddenly, a loud noise woke everyone up. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly looked up, only to see a hole torn in the sky. No. This was not a hole in the sky. This was a hole in the 6 directions 8 desolation array that guarded the Tree of Life. At first, the 6 directions 8 desolation array was taught to Tang Zheng by Tian Chanzi. Then, he personally set up the array and activated it. He had been guarding the Tree of Life without any mistakes. In his impression, the 6 directions 8 desolation array had a strong enough defense. However, the scene in front of him told him that nothing in the world was absolute. The 6 directions 8 desolation array was broken. Who attacked the 6 directions 8 desolation array? Tian Chanzi also reacted. He looked as if he was facing a great enemy. He shouted, "Who is it?" Whoosh, whoosh. In the sky, a figure came in the blink of an eye and stopped steadily above the Tree of Life. Ripples appeared around the Tree of Life, flowing with light and color, and then it collapsed little by little. Bang! Bang! The ground made a series of explosions, sand and dust were everywhere, and a white light was exposed from the ground. Heaven and earth obsidian. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank. He naturally recognized it. After the 6 directions 8 desolation array was broken, the heaven and earth obsidian was also exposed. They're here for the heaven and earth obsidian. Tang Zheng had an idea and immediately saw through the other party's motive. He raised his head and stared at the group of people in the sky. As expected, he found a familiar figure in the crowd. The demon race's Saint King. What? It's the demon race's people. When the others heard these words, they immediately realized the danger. They were guarding against Kai Yu, who had designs on the heaven and earth obsidian, so they came from far away. They didn't expect the demon race to move so quickly and follow them closely. If it wasn't for the inner demon's warning, the demon race would have been the first to get it. Tang Zheng rejoiced and reminded loudly, "They're here for the heaven and earth obsidian. Everyone, be careful. This group of people is very strong. Don't underestimate them." When the sword slaves saw this group of demon race flying in the sky, they were stunned. Many of them were scared, pale and trembling. Tang Zheng glanced at the sword slave and said, "Xiao Xiaoling, you take them away." "No." Xiao Xiaoling froze for a moment, and then flatly refused. "There are enemies, of course we have to fight together. If you don't want the Sword Empress to die, then listen to me and take them away." Tang Zheng said unquestionably. Most of the sword slaves were innate realm martial artists. Compared with the demon race's cultivators, their strength was really too low. They couldn't play much of a role at all. It was better to save their lives than to die. Xiao Xiaoling naturally understood Tang Zheng's intentions, but he really couldn't do something like running away. "What are you still standing there for? Go!" Tang Zheng scolded angrily. Xiao Xiaoling hesitated for a moment, looked at the demon race in the sky, stomped his feet and said, "Go." After saying that, he led the sword slaves and turned to leave. From time to time, some people looked back, but when they saw the high and mighty demon race in the sky, their heartstrings trembled and their faces turned pale. Tang Zheng looked at Yi Dingdang and Fang Shisha and said, "I know you won't go." Yi Dingdang and Fang Shisha looked at each other, showing a proud expression, and said, "You are smart. We are facing difficulties together, how can we run away? But the sword has no eyes, the other party is still a vicious and merciless demon race. You must be careful." Tang Zheng still did not forget to remind them. In the sky, Saint King looked at the people below, his eyes flashing. As for those sword slaves who left, he didn't put them in his heart. This is really as the ancestor said. If we were a step later, Tang Zheng would definitely beat us to it, and it would not be easy to get the heaven and earth Shen stone. Of course, my days in this boy's body are not in vain. Caillou's voice sounded. He did not say that even if Tang Zheng did not think of this, there was still the inner demons, and he had to be on guard. The inner demons were not only powerful, their spells were extraordinary, but also resourceful. Otherwise, it was impossible to fight with him and the Yellow Emperor for so many years. Caillou had been stored in the treasure box, and was inseparable from Saint King. This operation was his proposal, of course, he would accompany them all the way. The demon race had been looking for a suitable parasite for him, but the people of the island nation were all dead. Even those corpses could not meet the requirements of Caillou, so he could not be reborn in the island nation. Helpless, they could only secretly return to Huashia. With Kai Yu in the middle, the demon race was not wiped out like last time. Instead, they quietly sneaked into Huashia, and then secretly arrived at their destination. Of course, the demon race that returned to Huashia this time was only a portion. The majority of the demon race's troops remained in the island nation, and built their own headquarters. Island Nation was an overseas land. No matter what Huashia did, it would not be easy. This could effectively protect their strength. This was also Kai Yu's decision after careful consideration. He did not return to Huashia in a large scale. He understood that Huashia today was not the Huashia of tens of thousands of years ago. The government was not completely powerless, and the power of technology was not to be underestimated. Ancestor, then what should we do now? Of course we should snatch the heaven and earth obsidian. Most of the heaven and earth obsidian is buried here. If it falls into our hands, then Tang Zheng will not be able to rebuild the stairway to heaven. Naturally, we will be able to block the group of people from sky beyond heaven. Kai Yu said solemnly. He indeed thought of the same thing as the inner demons. Old people were shrewd, not to mention people at the level of Kai Yu and the inner demons. Their foresight was unique, and when they took one step, they saw 10 steps ahead. They were completely incomparable to ordinary people. Saint King said wholeheartedly, Ancestors' words are reasonable. As long as we block the people from sky beyond heaven, then we have nothing to worry about. This world is ours. Back then, the Yellow Emperor took this great land from our hands, and now we will take it back. Chapter 1163. Saint King waved his hand and ordered, Attack, take back the heaven and earth Shen stone. Su Su Su, a large group of demon elites moved, descending from the sky and pouncing towards the heaven and earth Shen stone below the Tree of Life. Move. Tang Zheng growled. Without any fancy moves, he rushed towards the heaven and earth Shen stone like lightning. The heaven and earth Shen stone was scattered around the Tree of Life. Now that it was completely exposed, it was sparkling and translucent, attracting everyone's attention. Seeing that a demon was about to get close to the heaven and earth Shen stone, Tang Zheng's head moved, and the war soul sword flew out from his hand, and with a poochie sound, it slashed onto that person's arm. Blood splattered everywhere. That person screamed miserably and fell down. Tang Zheng grabbed with his hand, using the sky swallowing technique. A black hole immediately appeared in his palm, and the sound of wind whistling could be heard. A few pieces of heaven and earth Shen stone were sucked into his palm, and with a flash of Sumeru heaven, the heaven and earth Shen stone fell into Sumeru heaven. Even though Tang Zheng had the sky swallowing technique, there was nothing he could do. Because the heaven and earth Shen stone was too scattered, and the distance was too far. There were even many behind the gigantic Tree of Life, blocked by the gigantic tree trunk, and the sky swallowing technique was useless. Tian Chanzi also moved. He and Tang Zheng parted ways, one in front and one behind. He went around the back of the Tree of Life. After repelling a few demons, he took the heaven and earth Shen stone for himself. There were a total of 66 heaven and earth Shen stone buried here, and he and Tang Zheng had only taken back a few pieces. The demon elites had all arrived under the tree, all kinds of treasures lit up, and the originally cool Tree of Life also exploded with a dazzling light. Fang Sheshe and Yi Dingdang were also fighting head-on with the demon clan. Their strength was not bad, and they were actually not at a disadvantage. This was because they knew that they lacked battle experience, so they cooperated with each other and had a tacit understanding. Tang Zheng repelled a few more demon clan S. His strength was not inferior to the ordinary elites of the demon clan S, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. In addition, he used the Taiji Yin-Yang sword technique, causing a few demon clan S to fall under his sword. Let's stop here. Suddenly, a voice exploded above his head. He didn't need to raise his head to know who it was. Saint King. Tang Zheng's whole body tensed up, and he became extremely alert. The long sword in his hand trembled, and with a swoosh, 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 swoosh. He didn't even look at it. Just by feeling, the power of this sword couldn't be underestimated. Petty tricks. Saint King snorted in disdain. Light blossomed from his hand, and the heaven-opening axe flew out of his hand, chopping down from the sky. Tang Zheng's Tai Chi yin-yang sword technique was exquisite beyond compare. The heaven-splitting axe appeared to be very clumsy, but with one strike of strength, it was able to defeat 10, and it chopped down on the War Soul sword. Boom! With a loud sound, Tang Zheng's feet sank into the ground, his arms trembled non-stop, and the War Soul sword flew out of his hands. Cracks appeared on the ground as if there was an earthquake. Mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Tang Zheng had once blocked Saint King's attack. That time, he used the holy armor shield to defend. Although he was injured and was sent flying, it was much easier than this time. It was obvious that the strength of Saint King's attack this time was very terrifying. However, he didn't know that Saint King had let Tang Zheng escape last time, and was fiercely reprimanded by Kai Yu. Therefore, he hated Tang Zheng. Although he knew that Tian Chan's cultivation was higher, he still came to deal with Tang Zheng without hesitation. Tang Zheng clenched his teeth so tightly that they were trembling. The War Soul sword flew away, and he hurriedly summoned the holy armor shield. When the heaven-opening axe was about to hit his body, the holy armor shield blocked the attack. With a boom, the holy armor shield trembled violently. Tang Zheng's arm went numb, but in the end, he still held on. However, half of his body was almost sunk into the soil, and he was in a sorry state. He was overwhelmed with shock. The difference in strength between him and Saint King was too great. Suddenly, from the corner of his eyes, he saw that a few demon clans had already snatched away a few heaven and earth black stones. He immediately bared his teeth and roared. No matter how loud his roar was, it couldn't change this reality. Those few heaven and earth black stones were snatched away by the demon clan. It wouldn't be easy to snatch them back. This was equivalent to the loss of the last method to restrain the demon clan. The strong sense of defeat completely ignited Tang Zheng's anger, and he roared towards the sky. The heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow appeared in his hands at the same time. He drew the bow and sword and shot towards Saint King. Saint King had always been on guard against the shooting sun arrow. The last time he almost suffered a great loss from the shooting sun arrow, it was still fresh in his memory. Furthermore, even the soul of the golden crow was shot down by the shooting sun arrow. How could he underestimate it? Seeing the flash of the arrow, Saint King's mind moved, and the heaven-opening axe descended once again. Boom! When the arrow and axe collided, it was like a bomb exploding, and the shockwave spread out in all directions. At the same time, Tang Zheng channeled his power, and with a leap, he soared into the sky from the soil, escaping from his predicament. Saint King also flew backwards. This time, Tang Zheng used all his strength to attack, causing Saint King to feel threatened. He was actually also in the semigod realm, but he was only at the 7th stage of the semigod realm. One had to know that in the sky beyond heaven, he was an expert in the Mahayana realm. However, after passing through the space gate, his power was weakened. This was a common phenomenon. When returning from the sky beyond heaven through the space gate, one's power would be weakened to varying degrees. However, after a period of time, one's power would slowly recover. Therefore, this wouldn't have much of an impact. Saint King could see at a glance that Tang Zheng's cultivation had increased from the last time, reaching the semigod realm. This was beyond his imagination, and it made him understand that this person was extraordinary. If he didn't get rid of him, he would become a big problem in the future. Therefore, although his attack didn't have any effect, his body flipped in mid-air, and the heaven-opening axe in his hand grew bigger again, until it was almost the same as his height. Tang Zheng, this is just the appetizer, the main course has just begun, Saint King said with a murderous look. Whoosh! The heaven-opening axe left the air, and with a whistling sound, it attacked Tang Zheng fiercely. Tang Zheng's pupils suddenly shrank, and he shouted, "Shooting sun arrow!" Whoosh! The shooting sun arrow shot out from his hand again. The shooting sun arrow was connected to his mind, and with lightning speed, it once again collided with the heaven-opening axe head-on. Thunder exploded. Tang Zheng was sent flying. Saint King retreated a few steps, but stabilized his body. His cultivation was much higher than Tang Zheng's, and furthermore, the heaven-opening axe was also a sacred weapon. Although it was slightly inferior to the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow, it was still not to be underestimated. Tang Zheng fiercely smashed into the trunk of the Tree of Life, creating a large crater in the trunk, and juice splattered everywhere. It had to be known that back then, Xing Feng had used professional equipment to chisel open the trunk of the Tree of Life, but Tang Zheng had actually smashed a large crater in the trunk. If not for the fact that he had cultivated the primal Chaos Vaja spell and his body's toughness far exceeded that of ordinary people, just this attack alone would have been enough to make him suffer. Cough cough. Tang Zheng coughed violently, blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth. He was in a sorry state. However, his eyes were still full of spirit. He was not prepared to retreat. Although he knew that he was at a disadvantage in this battle, he could only continue to fight. If he retreated, then even more heaven and earth profound stone would fall into the hands of the demon clan. He had already seen more than 10 pieces of heaven and earth profound stone fall into the hands of the demon clan. If this continued, then there would really be nothing he could do. Although Fang Shusha and Yi Dingdang had a tacit understanding of each other, they were still weak. Under a series of swift and fierce attacks, the disadvantage of the two gradually became apparent. Seeing that, Tang Zheng roared, his palm felt wet, and immediately understood that he had touched the sap of the Tree of Life. The sap of the Tree of Life was like a nectar, containing a powerful energy. Back then, Xing Feng had spent a lot of effort to take out a small bottle, and in the end, it fell into Tang Zheng's hands. He glanced at the tree trunk beside him, and the sap quickly flowed down. Tang Zheng grabbed the sap with his big hand, and poured it into his mouth. Immediately, a powerful energy exploded in his throat, and then flowed through his 8 extraordinary meridians, limbs, and bones. Tang Zheng felt as if his body was about to explode, and was filled with energy again. With a roar, he shot out from the tree trunk like a cannonball, directly pouncing towards Yi Dingdang and Fang Shusha. With a wave of his hand, the war soul sword that had landed in the distance flew back into his hand. Puff puff puff. The war soul sword was like harvesting radishes. A few large heads and bodies flew out with all their might. The demon clan that surrounded the two of them died one after another, and the two of them finally heaved a sigh of relief. Although they had participated in a few battles, it was slightly different from this one. This time, the people who surrounded them were all experts of the demon clan. They were all cultivators, and there was a difference between heaven and earth between them and martial artists. At the beginning, the two of them were full of fighting spirit, but gradually, they felt the pressure. However, they had no way out, and could only continue to fight bravely. "Are you guys all right?" Tang Zheng asked with concern. Yi Dingdang squeezed out a smile that was even uglier than crying, and said, "Of course we're fine." Fang Shusha's expression was also ugly. If it was in the past, when she saw the scene of her head being separated from her body, she would have vomited long ago. However, after experiencing so much, her nerves had become bigger, and she would not have stage fright. Seeing that Yi Dingdang was still able to laugh, Tang Zheng was slightly relieved and said, "You guys go into Shu Mitien, I will deal with them." "No, we want to fight side by side with you." The two of them shook their heads, their attitudes as resolute as ever. However, this time, Tang Zheng did not follow their wishes, because he had already realized that the danger this time was too great. If he was not careful and did not take care of them, it would lead to a huge mistake, and he would regret it for the rest of his life. "Come in." Tang Zheng did not allow them to explain, and with a wave of his hand, the light of Shu Mitien flickered and enveloped the two of them. In the next second, the two of them disappeared without a trace, entering Shu Mitien. Tang Zheng finally heaved a sigh of relief. Without any worries, he suddenly turned around, and faced Saint King from afar. The sage also looked at him with a burning gaze. His eyes blossomed with radiance as he said with interest, "TSK, TSK. You're truly an unkillable cockroach. You've endured such a powerful attack, yet you still have battle strength." Tang Zheng put the few pieces of heaven and earth obsidian at his feet into Shu Mitien, and said with a cold smile, "I am an unkillable cockroach. If you want to kill me, then come. Let's see if you can succeed." Chapter 1164. The heaven-splitting axe hacked down fiercely. This time, the momentum was even greater. The ground split open, and a huge crack spread out from under Tang Zheng's feet. Tang Zheng felt it even more strongly. He felt a force that was about to split his head open. He forcefully slashed out, and the battle soul flew out. Then, he drew his bow and shot an arrow. The shooting sun arrow whistled out again. A sword and an arrow blocked the heaven-splitting axe from the front and back. They were in a deadlock in mid-air. Bang! The battle soul flew out and sank into the ground, disappearing. The shooting sun arrow and the heaven-splitting axe retreated a large distance at the same time. At the same time, Saint King's figure flashed, and he was already in front of Tang Zheng. He punched out, as if splitting the sky and earth. Tang Zheng hurriedly raised the holy armor shield to defend. After a loud bang, Tang Zheng hurriedly retreated. His legs drew a deep groove in the ground, and he retreated dozens of meters before stopping. Boom! In mid-air, the shooting sun arrow was hacked down by the heaven-splitting axe. It shot to the ground, and the tail of the arrow was still trembling. The heaven-splitting axe's attack did not decrease, and it directly struck the holy armor shield. Catcher! A long crack appeared on the holy armor shield. The holy armor shield was only a heaven-grade magic treasure, and it could not be compared to a saint-grade magic treasure. This time, it finally could not block it. Tang Zheng was extremely frustrated. Before the holy armor shield was completely destroyed, he hurriedly kept it in Sumeru world. Facing the Saint King bare-handed, he was even less of a match. Azura! Helplessly, he roared. As soon as his mind moved, Shura flew out from Sumeru world. His tall body looked down at everything under his feet. The Azura had been suppressed by the Ksitagaba Sutra, so even in Sumeru world, he was in a state of hibernation. At this moment, after leaving Sumeru world, Tang Zheng also stopped using the Ksitagaba Sutra to suppress him. He suddenly opened his eyes, which were as red as blood. It made people feel as if they had fallen into a sea of corpses. It was extremely terrifying. Roar! Azura's roar reverberated throughout the world, causing the leaves of the Tree of Life to rustle. It was Saint King's first time seeing Azura. He was shocked as he felt a strong killing intent from the other party. He asked in horror, "What is this?" "Azura." Caillou's voice answered first. Tang Zheng was stunned and exclaimed, "Caillou! Ha ha, kid, we meet again." Caillou laughed. "Caillou, you treacherous fellow, you actually bewitched the devil clan to steal the heaven and earth obsidian." Tang Zheng said indignantly, "This is called preparing for a rainy day, do you understand? It's not like I don't know what you're thinking. You've already released the 5-clawed golden dragon, which means that you've obtained the heaven and earth obsidian under the imperial city. All the heaven and earth obsidian needed to reforge the stairway to heaven have appeared. If I don't take the first step and snatch the heaven and earth obsidian under the Tree of Life, wouldn't that give you the chance to reforge the stairway to heaven?" Caillou said proudly. "Do you think you can succeed?" Tang Zheng questioned. "The facts have proven that I've succeeded. Didn't you see that my people have already taken away a lot of heaven and earth obsidian? If you can't gather all the heaven and earth obsidian, then don't even think about reforging the stairway to heaven. Am I right?" Tang Zheng had no way to refute. Caillou's plan had indeed succeeded. He had perfectly predicted that the Devil Clan would return to Hua Xia so quickly and head straight for the Tree of Life. As long as he lacked even one heaven and earth obsidian, all his efforts would be in vain. Shura is a creature from the world of spirits and souls. He's extraordinary. You may not be his opponent, so be careful. Caillou warned. Saint King was not afraid. He was eager to give it a try. A creature from the world of spirits and souls? No wonder the yin qi on his body is so heavy. It's like he's entered a graveyard. Ancestor, don't worry. I'll definitely make this big guy's soul scatter. Dream on. Tang Zheng had seen Shura's strength. He was an existence that could compete with the Dezang of Gugurio. Although Saint King was powerful, Tang Zheng felt that he was still inferior to the Dezang of Gugurio. Saint King roared and took the lead to attack Shura. The Azura had just broken free from the suppression of the Ksitagaba Sutra. When he saw the sage rushing over, all of his attention was immediately attracted by the sage. With a roar, the Azura saber slashed out with a shua sound. The Shura saber collided with the heaven-splitting axe. Sparks flew everywhere. The heaven-splitting innate skill collapsed, and a small gap appeared. Saint King trembled violently and spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Shura with a pale face. He had thought that Caillou's words were exaggerated, but now he understood that it was not exaggerated at all. Shura's strength was really terrifying. Shura pursued and attacked Saint King with the Shura saber again. His body was tall, and when he attacked from midair, his strength was even more ferocious. Saint King raised the heaven-splitting axe with difficulty. With a flash of light, the heaven-splitting axe flew out of his hand and landed on the ground. It quickly shrank and finally became the size of a normal axe, dim and dull. Saint King retreated in a sorry state. Suddenly, his foot was tripped by something and he fell heavily to the ground. Shura walked towards him step by step. The violent yin qi rushed towards him, causing him to shudder. Tang Zheng took advantage of this gap and quickly defeated a few demon elites. He collected more than 10 heaven and earth obsidian. At the same time, Tian Chanzi also collected dozens of heaven and earth obsidian on the other side of the Tree of Life. The demons were no match for him at all. Hearing such a big commotion on the other side, he collected the heaven and earth obsidian and quickly moved over. He happened to see the battle between Shura and Saint King. The corner of his mouth twitched a few times. Shura is really too powerful. Saint King fell to the ground and looked at the thing that tripped him. It was actually a corpse, Song Yu's corpse. Damn it! Saint King cursed. He was about to push the corpse away when Caillou shouted, "Wait! Ancestor, what's wrong? The situation is urgent. I can't care so much. I can only settle for the second best," Caillou said helplessly. Saint King was confused. Seeing that Shura was about to reach him, he anxiously asked, "Ancestor, shut up. It's all because you're too weak. If I didn't make a move, you would definitely die in front of Shura," Caillou said hatefully. Saint King looked ashamed, but immediately became overjoyed and said, "Ancestor, you're saying that you're going to be reborn?" Chimpage, yes. Although this body isn't too good, in order to avoid total annihilation, this is the only way. You go and restrain Shura, Caillou ordered. Saint King looked at Shura deeply and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Although he knew that he was no match for Shura, for Caillou, he could only give it his all. Saint King roared, as if to encourage himself, and rushed towards Shura. However, he didn't confront him directly. Instead, he pretended to be polite and restrained Shura. Shura couldn't see through Saint King's thoughts. He opened and closed wide, Shura's blade dancing. This area was stirred up by this battle, as if the sky and earth were turned upside down, completely changing its appearance. The flowers and plants on the ground were destroyed, and even the Tree of Life was left with many scars. Juice flowed down the tree trunk, as if it was crying. Tang Zheng was busy collecting Xian stones of heaven and earth. He didn't hear the conversation between Shura and Caillou. After some effort, he finally collected all the Xian stones of heaven and earth on the ground. However, there were still more than 20 that fell into the hands of the demon clan. There was no way to snatch them one by one, unless they caught all the demon clan in one fell swoop. Tian Chanzi, stop the demon clan. Don't let them escape, Tang Zheng reminded loudly. Tian Chanzi's attention was attracted by Shura and Saint King. This level of life and death battle was rare. For Tian Chanzi, it was a rare opportunity to observe. Don't worry about those small fries. As long as Saint King is dead, they are nothing to worry about. Tian Chanzi said casually, but his heart was not relaxed at all. He was scared. If it weren't for Shura's help, he would have really failed miserably this time. The other demon clans were watching covetously, but they couldn't help at all. Most of these demon clans were in the Yuanying realm of the Golden Core realm. They were a level lower than Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi. They could only watch anxiously. A few demon clans who were not afraid of death saw Saint King in danger and rushed to Shura, trying to help Saint King. Shura kicked a few times, and these people were immediately kicked. With a loud bang, they exploded and turned into a mass of flesh and blood. This made the other demon clans shrink back, and they didn't dare to approach. Saint King's body was already wounded. He had already called back the sky-splitting axe, but he was still no match for Shura. He was almost hit by Shura's saber several times. Saint King's face was pale. From time to time, he secretly looked at Song Yu's body. There was a treasure box next to her body, which contained Kai Yu's soul. Tang Zheng and Tian Chan's attention was attracted by the battle, and they didn't notice this scene. Little bits of light seeped out of the treasure box and sank into Song Yu's body. This body was quickly transformed, and the vitality that had been cut off gradually glowed again. The ordinary body was strengthened and became more solid. The narrow meridians were widened, and a little bit of true qi was born from the meridians. It flowed along the meridians to the limbs and bones, nourishing the body and tempering the body. A golden elixir gradually formed in the dantian, shining with golden light, as if it was going to come out of the body. The true qi revolved around the golden elixir rapidly, and the golden elixir grew bigger. Finally, as if it was earth-shattering, the golden elixir changed and gradually became the appearance of a human, with a head and limbs growing out. Yuanying. The golden elixir evolved into Yuanying. Yuanying's appearance became clear, and she looked exactly like Song Yu, vivid and lifelike. Yuanying opened her eyes and looked at the changes in her body. Meridians and blood vessels grew out of Yuanying's body, and hair and bones grew out one by one. In the end, she was no different from a real person. Yuanying's eyes were flowing with purple light, and she was filled with a mysterious aura. Yuanying's lips curled up slightly, and at the same time, the corners of her body's mouth also curled up, revealing a strange smile. But she was lying flat, and no one noticed this smile at all. The battle between the Azura and Saint King became more and more thrilling. Saint King's heart almost jumped out of his chest, and he couldn't help but recall the days when he was in the heavens beyond heaven. Back then, he was on tenterhooks every day, and he could encounter such a tragic life and death battle at any time. He was tired of such days. He originally thought that after returning, he would become a peerless powerhouse, and no one would be able to challenge him. But the reality was too cruel. Song Yu's body was completely transformed. At this moment, she was no longer Song Yu, but Kai Yu. Whoosh. Chapter 1165. Kai Yu opened his eyes, and a bright light burst out from his eyes, which was very frightening. Song Yu's shadow was gone. Although it was the same body, it was completely Kai Yu. This was not the bluff of Song Yu's strength, but a kind of strength from the inside to the outside, which was frightening. At a glance, people would recognize the awe in their hearts. Song Yu stood up straight. Shura and Saint King were still fighting fiercely. The corner of Saint King's eyes had been paying attention to the direction of Kai Yu. Finally, his eyes lit up and he showed joy. He shouted, "Ancestor!" Others also noticed the movement here. When they saw Song Yu standing up straight, Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi were surprised at the same time. The two of them saw Xiao Xiaoling's sword pierce Song Yu's heart and cut off his vitality. But at this moment, Song Yu stood up again. Could it be that he was resurrected? Tang Zheng did not have this ability. His 9 revolutions soul return pill could not save a dead person. What's the matter? Tian Chanzi took the lead in shouting. Tang Zheng stared at Song Yu intently. When he heard the word ancestor from Saint King's mouth, his heart trembled. He was shocked and said, "Ancestor. Could it be that you are Kai Yu?" "Ha ha ha, Tang Zheng, you finally became one." Kai Yu laughed wildly. His hair and beard were all standing up, and his clothes were fluttering. His face showed an insolent expression, which was completely different from Song Yu. Tang Zheng finally determined that this was indeed not Song Yu, but Kai Yu's reincarnation. Kai Yu had been trying to take away Tang Zheng's body. After all, both of them were Skywalkers. With the 9 young saint body, Tang Zheng's physique was more compatible with Kai Yu, which could guarantee Kai Yu's cultivation and future achievements. Now, Kai Yu actually chose the second best option and chose Song Yu's body. Tang Zheng looked at Shura and immediately understood that this was Kai Yu's decision. The situation of the battle between the Azura and the Sage was already very clear. If there was no external force, the Sage would definitely not be the Azura's opponent. Then, the Devil race would only be sending themselves to their deaths by rushing over here. Kai Yu naturally wouldn't just sit by and watch. For his grand plan, the Devil race couldn't be completely annihilated, especially Saint King. That was why he took a step back and chose Song Yu's body, in order to preserve the strength of the devil race. Tang Zheng's expression had already changed. He looked at Kai Yu and said, "Kai Yu, I didn't think you would choose Song Yu." Kai Yu coldly snorted. "Do you think I want to?" There really were quite a few bodies here, but the others were all cultivators. Whether they were alive or dead, their bodies still contained the remnants of their original owners. Only Song Yu was a martial artist. Martial artists and cultivators were two different systems. After Kai Yu took Song Yu's body, he could completely change it according to his will. This was an advantage that cultivators couldn't compare to. That was why, in the end, Song Yu's body enjoyed this opportunity. If Song Yu knew in the underworld, he would definitely be very happy. He would even be willing to give his body to Kai Yu. He had always wanted to win against Tang Zheng. Before his death, he had always been firmly suppressed by Tang Zheng. He didn't even have the chance to resist. However, after his death, his dream came true. In another way, he used his own body as the price to win against Tang Zheng. Kai Yu had always been in Tang Zheng's body. He was very clear about the conflict between Tang Zheng and Song Yu. He coldly laughed and said, "Tang Zheng, although Song Yu is dead, I can still feel the strong resentment he left behind for you. He definitely wanted to win against you and kill you. Now that I have taken over his body, I can fulfill his wish." Tang Zheng's expression became colder and colder. He snorted and said, "You should know what kind of person Song Yu is. You will fulfill his wish. Ha ha. However, Kai Yu, you are this kind of person, so I shouldn't be surprised." After saying this, Tang Zheng felt a little emotional. The Wu tribe and the demon tribe led by Kai Yu were completely different. They were not the same kind of people. He really couldn't imagine that the Wu tribe of ancient times would be Kai Yu's subordinates, or even the origin of the Zhou tribe. The Wu tribe was kind and pure, as if they had gathered the bright side of the world. Back then, why was the Wu tribe sealed? Tang Zheng suddenly thought, could it be that there was some unknown secret? Otherwise, why did Kai Yu keep avoiding talking about it? Haha, Tang Zheng, you know me very well. It's no wonder that we have been together for so long. Kai Yu laughed proudly. Since we are so familiar with each other, it's useless to say anything unnecessary. Let's fight. However, there is something I have to remind you. Although the Shura is powerful, he is not under your control. Tang Zheng snorted disapprovingly and said, "Then it's not too late for you to say such big words after you defeat the Shura." Kai Yu looked at Tang Zheng lightly, smiled strangely, and walked slowly towards the Shura. Saint King retreated to Kai Yu's side in a sorry state. He looked at him excitedly and said respectfully, "Ancestor, go back and watch carefully." Kai Yu said. Saint King said in fear and trepidation, "Yes." He looked at Kai Yu with eager eyes. Everyone looked at Kai Yu at the same time. The Shura's attention was also firmly attracted to Kai Yu. Although the Shura did not have consciousness, he was not stupid. He instinctively recognized that Kai Yu was the person who posed the greatest threat to him. For the greatest threat, the Shura naturally paid the greatest attention. Roar. The Shura roared and rushed towards Kai Yu step by step. His speed gradually became faster, and a cold wind blew. Sand and stones flew, and it was incomparably violent. When the other demons saw this, they instinctively retreated. Their faces were pale, and they realized that this level of battle was far beyond their ability to bear. To avoid being affected, it was better to retreat further away. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi did not retreat. Instead, they stared at the Shura. Tang Zheng was full of confidence in the Shura. He knew the Shura too well. The Shura was born in the Nine Serenities Hell. If it were not for the Dezang of Gugurio, the world of spirits and souls would have been slaughtered by the Shura. Although Kai Yu was resurrected, his strength was definitely not at his peak. Inner demons, what was the cultivation level of Kai Yu back then? Tang Zheng asked. Of course it was the realm of great success. As for what it was in the end, I don't know. The inner demons replied. Tang Zheng had a rough idea. The inner demons and Kai Yu's cultivation level were not too different. The inner demons knew a lot about Kai Yu, so his words should be true. After a powerhouse of great success was resurrected, his cultivation level was definitely not low. As for the comparison with the Shura, that was unknown. Caillou was still walking step by step, very slowly towards the Shura. His face was calm, as if he did not put the Shura in his eyes at all. Finally, the Shura rushed in front of Caillou. The Shura blade fell from the sky and quickly slashed down. Caillou stretched out a hand and made a grabbing motion toward the ground. Bang! The ground exploded, and a cold light broke out of the ground. The War Soul sword flew out from the ground and fell into Caillou's hands. The sword light overflowed in all directions. Sword Soul, you and I are finally fighting side by side again. Let them see your true power. Caillou gently flicked the War Soul sword. The War Soul sword buzzed and trembled, and the light became more and more dazzling. Chapter 1166. Tang Zheng stared at the War Soul sword in disbelief. He had thought that the War Soul sword would no longer listen to Caillou's control. Last time might have been a coincidence, but now he understood that his thoughts were too naive. Damn it, it must be the sword spirit. When Caillou appeared and allowed the sword spirit to fuse into the Battle Soul sword, he actually left behind a backup plan so that he could control the Battle Soul sword from behind. He is really scheming. I was completely fooled by him. He tried to establish a connection with the War Soul sword, but found that there was no reaction at all. Caillou held the War Soul sword in his hand and stood tall. The sword light was dazzling as it descended from the sky and charged towards the Azura. The Azura saber shone brightly, leaving a long trail as it swept across the sky. In the next second, it fiercely collided with the War Soul sword. The two rays of light went against the flow and rushed into the sky from the point of impact. Rustle, rustle, rustle. The leaves fluttered in the air, and with a few catcher sounds, a few branches fell from the sky. The tree of life became a fish in the pond and was damaged once again. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth fluctuated violently. Tang Zheng shouted that something was wrong. In the past, the tree of life was protected by the 8 Desolation Great Array, so even if there was a battle, it would not be affected. But now that the Great Array had been broken, the tree of life had lost its protection. Although the tree of life's resistance to attacks was already very strong, it was still difficult for it to withstand the attacks of Caillou and the Azura. If the tree of life was affected, then the world's spiritual energy would change. If the tree of life fell, then the world's spiritual energy could no longer be transformed, let alone be raised to the level of a great world. Tang Zheng understood the stakes too well, so his expression became less serious. However, he and Tian Chanzi had no choice. Facing the battle between the Azura and Caillou, even he was powerless and could not participate. Tian Chanzi saw Tang Zheng's worry and comforted him. Whether the tree of life is damaged or not, that is a matter of the future. Let's take care of the things in front of us first and pass through this stage. Tang Zheng nodded bitterly. He had no other choice but to do this. Tian Chanzi changed the topic and said, however, Caillou's strength is really strong. Even after being reborn, he still has such a cultivation base. No wonder he was the leader of a powerful tribe in ancient times and almost dominated the world. After Tian Chanzi was reborn, his cultivation had dropped a lot compared to when he was alive, so he knew that Caillou's current strength was far below his true level. There was no doubt that in the future, Caillou's cultivation would advance by leaps and bounds, gradually returning to his peak state. At that time, it would be even more difficult to restrain him. Even if he joined forces with Tang Zheng and the Empyrean Fairy, they might not be able to defeat Caillou. Tian Chanzi fell into deep worry and said, Tang Zheng, Caillou's strength is most likely at the edge of the Grand Ascension stage. Shura might not necessarily be able to win. Tang Zheng's heart sank. He knew that Shura was only a hair's breadth away from the Grand Ascension stage because Dezang of Gugurio was at the Grand Ascension stage, which was why he was able to suppress Shura. If Caillou's cultivation base was also at the edge of the Grand Ascension stage, then Shura would be at a disadvantage and they would be in danger. Tian Chanzi's guess was correct. If Caillou had found a good body and been reborn, then his cultivation base would definitely be at the Grand Ascension stage. However, he had taken a step back and found Song Yu's body at the last minute, so he was naturally far from being at the Grand Ascension stage. Currently, he was only at the peak of the 9th stage of the soul formation stage, which was only a hair's breadth away from the grand ascension stage. However, for Caillou, crossing this threshold was only a matter of time, and it would not take too long. The battle between Shura and Caillou was earth-shattering. Everyone was stunned. Tang Zheng had never seen a battle of this level other than in the ghost realm, so he could not hide the shock on his face. This time, not only did the demon elites retreat, but even Tang Zheng, Tian Chanzi, and Saint King had to retreat step by step. In the end, they retreated out of the range of the Tree of Life. In the distance, one could only see two people, one tall and one short, fighting with all their might. Shura had the advantage of height, but Caillou was more agile. He was like a flash of light, shuttling back and forth in midair. When his sword flashed, it would definitely bring a large amount of black chi to Shura's body. Shura did not have a real physical body. Although he was tall, he was formed from the fusion of countless vengeful spirits. Therefore, when he was injured, what left his body was a stream of yin chi. A stream of black yin chi surrounded the Tree of Life. The flowers and plants on the ground quickly withered and lay on the ground softly. In the end, they turned into a charred black color. The vitality in this space was being consumed little by little. In addition, Caillou's attack made this space even worse. It was a mess. The charred plants and trees danced in the air, and sand and stones flew. This oasis seemed to have turned into a barren desert. Shura suffered a lot from the war soul sword, and there were many wounds on his body. However, he did not retreat. Instead, he roared again and again, and attacked Caillou even more angrily. The Shura had only one thought, and that was to kill. Although it had suffered a lot, the killing intent in its heart grew stronger and stronger. The cold wind between heaven and earth roared angrily, as if it had become a ghost world. Caillou flew up and circled in front of the Shura. He roared, "So what if you're in Shura? Under the attack of my 9 shaman sword technique, you can only passively take a beating." The 9 shaman sword technique was Caillou's ultimate technique. There were only a total of 9 swords, and each sword contained a myriad of changes. This was a sword technique that he created by fusing various secret techniques passed down by the shaman clan. It had to be said that Caillou was a genius. After summarizing the achievements of his predecessors, he mastered them and turned them into his own. This was what Tang Zheng had hoped for. A true peerless ranker did not only inherit the legacy of his predecessors, but also created something on the basis of it. This was a true peerless ranker. Without a doubt, Caillou was this kind of person. In fact, the shaman clan had been around for a long time. Before Caillou, the shaman clan was already a tribe that had existed for a long time. It was only under the leadership of Caillou that they truly flourished and obtained eye-catching achievements, almost unifying the world. The shaman clan was the foundation of the 9 Li tribe. Caillou came from the shaman clan, and then led the shaman clan to conquer the world. He unified the other 8 main tribes and then merged them into the 9 Li tribe. This was the origin of the 9 Li tribe. But later on, many people only knew about the 9 Li tribe, but they knew very little about the shaman clan. The light on the war soul sword became more and more intense, so piercing that people could not open their eyes. Tang Zheng subconsciously narrowed his eyes into slits. This time, the power displayed by the war soul sword far exceeded the power in his hands, causing him to feel a sense of loss. Now that he saw the war soul sword erupt with such a powerful power, his heartstrings trembled. Suddenly, Tang Zheng realized that he had seen a double image. The war soul sword seemed to have turned from 1 into 2, 2 into 4, and finally into 9 shining swords. Tang Zheng suddenly opened his eyes. The sword light became more and more dazzling, burning his eyes until they hurt. However, he still persevered, clearly discovering that these swords were not double images, but real 9 swords. The war soul sword was something that Tang Zheng had refined bit by bit. He had never found out that the war soul sword could transform into 9 swords, which made him feel uneasy. He really knew too little about the war soul sword, especially that sword spirit. Although it had fused with the war soul back then, the war soul's consciousness was very weak, and could not be compared to the sword spirit that had its own consciousness. Therefore, the sword spirit in the war soul sword was the foundation. He did not understand the sword spirit well enough, so his understanding of the war soul sword was also relatively limited. He stomped his feet hatefully and said, "Caillou is really a cunning old fox. You lied to me for so long." However, he did not know that the sword spirit was not an ordinary artifact spirit. This sword spirit was originally the sword spirit of Caillou's sword. However, in the Battle of Zhuelu, Caillou's sword was destroyed, but the sword spirit was left behind. The sword spirit and the sword attendant's soul fused into one. The sword attendant survived, but in the end, died in the sky pit of the Changbai mountain. After countless years, the sword spirit and the sword attendant's soul were inseparable. Coincidentally, the sword spirit was discovered by the National Security Bureau and the people of the island nation. In the end, under the control of Caillou, the sword spirit fused with the war soul sword, increasing its quality. Caillou deliberately sealed the sword spirit's original memories, so that even the sword spirit itself could not remember what happened in the past. Therefore, when Tang Zheng released the sword spirit that had fused with the war soul sword, he did not notice this point. The sword spirit was like a piece of white paper, allowing Tang Zheng to draw on it. Unfortunately, the sword spirit was an unstable factor. Once Caillou opened the switch, the sword spirit's sealed memories would be restored and it would return to its original appearance. The war soul sword naturally became the sword in Caillou's hand. Although Tang Zheng was not clear about the details, he could roughly guess what was going on. His expression became extremely ugly. This was equivalent to making wedding clothes for others, and it was all for naught. Tang Zheng stared at the war soul sword without blinking. The 9 swords seemed to be mocking him. He clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. "Caillou, do you think the war soul sword will be snatched away by you just like that? Even if you take my things away, I will take them back." Tang Zheng secretly swore. Tang Zheng was not someone who would easily admit defeat. Although he was tricked this time and suffered a setback, how could he give up just like that? Caillou glanced at Tang Zheng from the corner of his eyes and knew what he was thinking. He smiled faintly and said in his heart, "Tang Zheng, you want to take back the war soul sword, but you will never have the chance. This is my sword, and it was only temporarily in your hands before. Now that I have been reborn, how can there be a share for you? I will let you see its power, and let you know what it means to cast pearls before swine, and what it means to be covered in dust." In Caillou's eyes, the war soul sword in Tang Zheng's hands was just a dust-covered sword. Caillou pointed his finger, and 9 swords flew out. The Shura was surrounded by the 9 swords, and he was firmly locked down by the 9 swords. "Break!" Caillou roared, and the 9 swords all trembled at the same time, releasing waves of high-pitched sword cries that were sharp and ear-piercing, as if they wanted to tear apart the space. Whiz! The 9 swords moved at the same time, stabbing towards the Shura from 9 different directions in a very tricky manner. Puff puff puff. Chapter 1167. 9 swords, each sword hit the Shura's vital points. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely die after taking these 9 swords. The Shura was not an ordinary person, it was not even human. Therefore, when it fell to the ground, its body seemed to have opened up a hole. Black qi flowed out from the wound, and in an instant, black yin qi enveloped its entire body. Below the tree of life, the originally warm scene of grass and birds flying in the air turned into a hell on earth. The cold wind roared, causing people to shudder. The Shura blade was still in the Shura's hand, but its light dimmed. Tang Zheng's heart trembled, his eyes almost popped out. He shouted in disbelief, "Shura!" The Shura did not respond to him, quietly lying on the ground as if it was really dead. He wanted to rush up and see what happened, but he was pulled back by Tian Chanzi. "Be careful. Don't go." Tian Chanzi said with a heavy expression, "If the Shura is dead, it would be useless for you to go. Instead, facing Caillou, you won't have a chance to escape. If it's not dead, you won't be able to help." Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks, understanding that Tian Chanzi's words were reasonable. The 2 of them stared at the Shura, and the others also stared at the Shura. The Shura gave them too much of a shock. No one could be sure that the Shura had died like this. Even Caillou could not be sure. The Shura did not have any life force, so it was impossible to determine whether it was dead or alive from afar. Caillou carefully walked towards the Shura. Although he was confident in his attack, he could not be at ease without personally confirming it. Caillou stopped in front of the Shura. He saw that the yin qi in the wounds was leaking out, causing the Shura's body to be completely covered by a layer of dense yin qi. The Shura's body was actually becoming blurry. "Yi, what's going on?" Caillou muttered to himself. "Humph, no matter what's wrong with you, I'll give you a few more swords." With a thought, he pointed his finger at the Shura. The 9 war spirit swords fell from the sky at the same time, attacking the Shura. Pu, pu, pu. The war soul sword passed through the Azura's body without any hindrance. The Azura did not have the slightest reaction, but his body had a few more holes. When the others saw this scene, they were so shocked that they trembled all over. "Crap!" Tang Zheng subconsciously cried out in alarm, his face turning even paler. Could it be that Shura is really dead? This was far beyond his expectations. The devil clansmen simultaneously revealed a joyful expression, and some even cheered. Azura had given them a great deal of pressure. Seeing Azura die, the huge rock in their hearts was immediately removed. The corners of Caillou's mouth also curled up in joy, and his eyes became relaxed. He turned his head to look at Tang Zheng, who was still in shock, as if to say, "Tang Zheng, now you know how powerful I am." Back then, in the world of spirits and souls, Caillou had seen the power of Azura and naturally had an assessment of his strength. He had to admit that Azura was indeed extraordinary and was a natural anomaly. In fact, the Dezang of Gugurio even needed to use the Ksitagaba Sutra to truly suppress it. As for the matter of the Dezang of Gugurio teaching Tang Zheng the Ksitagaba Sutra, Caillou and the inner demons were very clear about it. However, things like inheritance were not just because they could learn the Ksitagaba Sutra in Tang Zheng's body. The Ksitagaba Sutra was a secret, and other than Tang Zheng, no one else could learn it. Therefore, even though Caillou knew that the Ksitagaba Sutra could suppress Azura, he could not use this method. Now that he had killed Azura with his own strength, Caillou's confidence gradually rose. When he was hiding in Tang Zheng's body, he was really suppressed by Tang Zheng, and even Caillou's heartblood was sucked away. If he had Caillou's heart, then after he was reborn, his strength would definitely not stop at the threshold of the Mahayana realm, and he would not have to spend so much effort to deal with Azura. Roar. Suddenly, a roar came from Azura's mouth. It was earth-shattering, and it shook the leaves of the trees. Azura exploded with a bang, and it turned into wisps of yin qi that soared into the sky like a tornado, sweeping towards Caillou. Caillou's heartstrings trembled, and he tried to block it, but he found that the yin qi had already gathered from all directions, enveloping his whole body. It seeped into his body from his mouth, nose, ears, eyes, and even his paws. "Ah!" Caillou screamed in shock, "What's going on? It's not dead." Azura was indeed not dead, but it had changed. This change made Caillou panic, and he watched helplessly as the yin qi seeped into his body. He hurriedly urged his true qi to block the yin qi. However, the yin qi was fierce and unstoppable. Caillou's eyes burst with a terrifying light, and he growled, "I want to see what ability you have, get out of here." Caillou had rich battle experience, and after the initial panic, he immediately calmed down. War Soul Sword, enter my body. The 9 War Soul Swords merged into one and quickly shrank, until they were almost invisible to the naked eye. Then, Azura opened his mouth and the War Soul Sword flew in. This scene left Tang Zheng dumbstruck. He had been with the War Soul Sword all day, but he didn't know that it had this ability. The War Soul Sword disappeared, but in Caillou's body, it was like a fish in water, walking through his meridians. Wherever the sword light passed, the yin qi would be swept away. The yin qi was pervasive. Although the War Soul Sword was very powerful, Caillou's body was still rapidly consuming his life force. The surface of his skin gradually turned black, like charcoal. Caillou obviously understood what this meant. If he could not expel the yin qi from his body in time, the yin qi would destroy his body. If the skin did not exist, where would the hair be? Without a physical body, Caillou's power would naturally not exist, and he would not be a match for the Azura. This guy looks like a killing machine, but I didn't expect him to have such intelligence. He actually used such a method to deal with me. Caillou thought hatefully, and could not help but be puzzled. With his understanding of the Azura, it only had killing in its heart, and was equivalent to a walking corpse. Although it was powerful, its intelligence was effective. It only knew how to charge forward, and was not much different from a 3-year-old child. This time, the change in the Azura's attack was something that Caillou had never seen before. This meant that its intelligence was actually increasing, which was extraordinary and did not match Caillou's judgment. Strange, there must be something strange. Caillou vowed. In imminent danger, he did not have the energy to search for the reason. He could only desperately urge the War Soul Sword to sweep away the yin qi. The Azura's yin qi was too strong, it covered the sky and covered the earth, completely enveloping Caillou. Even if the War Soul Sword swept away the yin qi in an area, there would immediately be more yin qi seeping into his body, destroying all the previous efforts. Chapter 1168. The others stared at this scene unblinkingly. When they saw Caillou's entire body turn into charcoal, they couldn't help but feel their blood run cold. Yin qi, this is the effect of yin qi. Tian Chanzi excitedly waved his fist as he spoke. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. He naturally understood the power of yin qi. The reason why humans were unable to stay in the ghost realm for long periods of time was because yin qi was extremely harmful to the human body. It corroded a person's yang qi and ultimately led to death. Tang Zheng could freely travel through the ghost realm because he had the 9-yang saint body. He did not fear yin qi, or it could be said that yin qi was unable to corrode the powerful yang qi in his body. Caillou himself was also a celestial with the 9-yang saint body. However, his physical body had already been destroyed, leaving only his soul residing in Song Yu's body. This body did not have many special features, so naturally it was unable to resist the corrosion of yin qi. The Shura was born from the ghost realm's evil qi. Its yin qi is much more powerful than normal yin qi. Now it seems that it is indeed not normal. Caillou is going to suffer a great loss. Tang Zheng inwardly nodded as he spoke. Yes, who would have thought that the Shura would have such a move? This is truly an eye-opener. Tian Chanzi sighed. The two of them were not like Caillou, who directly thought that the Shura's wisdom was slowly budding. Otherwise, Tang Zheng would have been even more shocked. Dezang of Gugurio had never mentioned that the Shura's wisdom would be slowly budding. Naturally, Tang Zheng also did not think in this direction. The demons turned pale with fright. They were dumbstruck as they stared blankly at Caillou. However, they were unable to do anything and were unable to interfere. Caillou continued to use Battle Soul to sweep away the yin qi. Both sides were in a deadlock as they fought back and forth. Ah! Caillou roared and puffed out his chest. Puff, 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 streams of blood gushed out from his body, and there were a few more bloody holes on his body. Caillou's eyes were crimson red as he gritted his teeth and roared, "With my blood, with my soul as the guide, blood will flow from the heavens to the earth." Blood flowed out of Caillou's body like poisonous snakes. They fell to the ground and then wriggled in all directions. Everywhere they passed, the earth turned red. The vegetation was also dyed red and emitted a demonic light. The air was filled with a nauseating stench of blood. Coupled with the howling of the wind, it made one's heart turn cold. Tang Zheng was shocked to see a stream of blood swimming towards him. He hurriedly retreated and said, "Tian Chanzi, retreat. There's something strange about this blood. Don't let the blood stain it." Tian Chanzi also reminded. The two of them had unique eyesight. They could see that the blood was very strange, especially the words that Caillou was chanting. They seemed to be an incantation. He was definitely using some strange divine ability that made people shudder. When Saint King heard these 16 words, his eyes were filled with shock. He had once seen these 16 words in the ancient records of the demon race. However, the description of these 16 words was not detailed. It only said that in ancient times, it was a very harmful spell that could not be easily used. Otherwise, it would have a backlash effect on the caster. The name of this spell was Blood Soul Sacrifice. It used blood and souls as a sacrifice. As for the specific effects, there were no records in the ancient records. Saint King also did not know. Seeing Caillou use this divine ability that disappeared without a trace with his own eyes, Saint King was somewhat excited. He stared at Caillou with incomparable fanaticism. Ah! A scream interrupted Saint King's thoughts. He subconsciously turned his head to look, only to see that the scream came from the mouth of one of his subordinates. The blood flowed to the feet of this person and quickly flowed along his legs to the rest of his body. In an instant, it was full of his body. He looked like there were many red lines under his skin. It was very strange. He screamed and struggled, but there was no way to resist. In the end, he rolled on the ground to no avail. Saint King was about to rush over to rescue him, but found that this person had stopped rolling and was twitching non-stop. His skin quickly carbonized and finally stopped twitching. There was no life left, and he turned into black charcoal. A cold wind blew, and this body seemed to fall apart, turning into ashes and drifting away with the wind. When everyone saw this scene, they felt a chill run through their bodies. It was as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Looking at each other, many people screamed and fled. How could this spell be so strange? After cutting off a person's life, it still produced such a terrifying effect. Quick, look at Caillou. Tang Zheng shouted and pointed at Caillou. Everyone turned their heads to look and found that Caillou was changing. The originally carbonized skin was actually returning to normal little by little. His physical condition was recovering. Tang Zheng's head lit up as he understood what was going on. He cried out involuntarily, he's using a spell to absorb the life of others to make up for himself. This spell is too insidious. It's against the harmony of the heavens. Tian Chanzi immediately identified, the demon race has many strange spells, and this is probably one of them. It's a pity that he's absorbing the life of his own people. He's really ruthless. Tang Zheng sneered and said, of course he's ruthless. He doesn't even care about the lives of hundreds of millions of people. What's the big deal about a few of his subordinates dying? Indeed, it's not a big deal. The demon race has always had this tradition. Tian Chanzi also agreed. Caillou is absorbing the life of others. Doesn't that mean he can fight against the Shura's Yin Qi? Tang Zheng's head moved and suddenly sank. His expression became serious. Tian Chanzi didn't answer, because it was still unknown who would win in the confrontation between this spell and the Shura. Everyone felt the danger. No one dared to let the blood near them and fled like a swarm of bees. There was no blood, and Caillou's condition worsened again. His skin turned black. Caillou trembled violently. Bang! With a loud sound, he knelt on the ground with one knee and stubbornly raised his head. He didn't give in. Caillou actually knelt. It was obvious how much damage the Shura had done to him. Saint King's expression kept changing. He was hesitant. Caillou's importance to him was self-evident. If he really allowed Caillou to be defeated by the Shura, then the demon race would be unable to recover. Their painstaking efforts to return would be in vain. No. He definitely couldn't accept this reality. Saint King's eyes were cold. He glanced at the people around him and immediately locked onto one of them. He grabbed him and threw him into the blood on the ground. Ah! Before that person could react, he was possessed by the blood. He immediately rolled on the ground and finally convulsed. He quickly carbonized and scattered with the wind. Caillou's condition also quickly improved. His eyes gradually shone, and his life force recovered bit by bit. He looked at Saint King with eyes full of admiration. Saint King's heart was bitter, but for the sake of the great cause, he had to sacrifice his own subordinates. Your sacrifice is worth it. In the future, the great cause of the demon race will be due to your contributions. I will remember you. Saint King muttered to himself, as if comforting the souls of these people. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted, and he looked at Heaven Monk at the same time. His face turned pale, and he could see the shock in each other's eyes. Saint King didn't hesitate to sacrifice the lives of his subordinates. He even did it himself. Hurry up and run, why are you still standing there like idiots? Tang Zheng roared, reminding the demon clan. The demons woke up from their dream and immediately scattered. Saint King caught 2 more people and let the blood attach to them. But the others fled, so he couldn't catch anyone for a while. I'll go stop him. Tian Chanzi volunteered and rushed in front of Saint King. With a shake of his long sword, he greeted Saint King with the heavenly fairy sword technique. Saint King was furious. "You're courting death." Saint King's cultivation was higher than Tian Chanzi's. Naturally, he wasn't afraid of him. His sky-opening axe fiercely counterattacked Tian Chanzi. Caillou's situation took a turn for the worse as he didn't have the new life force to continuously replenish him. Saint King saw this and was anxious. Facing Tian Chanzi's entanglement, he couldn't immediately win and couldn't bear to be disturbed. This can't go on. Saint King was very anxious. His face suddenly changed, and he shouted, "Stop! All of you stop!" The demons subconsciously stopped and stood stiffly in the same place. They turned to look at Saint King with a complicated expression. "Come back for me. The time has come when the ancestor needs you all. For the sake of the devil race's 1,000-year great undertaking, this is your honor. You all will forever be remembered by the devil race. You all are heroes of the devil race," the sage said sonorously. Many people who were hesitant and fearful immediately changed their expressions. Their eyes became determined, like martyrs who were going to die. They turned around and walked resolutely toward the blood. Their footsteps were heavy, with the determination to die. There was no panic in their footsteps, nor was there any panic or wavering like before. Tang Zheng saw this scene and his heart sank. This was the demons. For the same goal, they were willing to die without caring about their own lives. What kind of spirit was this? Fearless spirit. Even for many righteous sects, it was extremely difficult for such a situation to occur. From this, it could be seen that the strength of the demon race was not undeserved, nor was it baseless. They were united, and did not fear death. This completely surpassed many of the scattered righteous sects. The demons are so terrifying. When we fight them in the future, we can't let our guard down. Tang Zheng silently made up his mind. Although the Azura currently had the upper hand, Tang Zheng did not think that he could completely crush the demon clan this time and capture them all in one fell swoop. The demons were like wild grass. Even a wildfire couldn't burn them, they would grow again when the spring breeze blew. Across the long river of history, the demon's shadow had never been cut off. Naturally, it was impossible to completely destroy the demons with just a few people. "Stop them!" Tian Chanzi shouted. Tang Zheng's figure flashed and stopped a demon. However, the other side deliberately bypassed him and threw themselves on the blood on the ground. Immediately, a victorious smile appeared on his face. Finally, this smile froze. Lines of blood covered his body. He was like a statue, motionless. He didn't even fall to the ground and wail. He was completely different from the people before. This made Tang Zheng sink deeper and deeper. In the blink of an eye, the demon's transformation made people feel awe and fear. Chapter 1169. The demons fell one after another, sacrificing more than 10 lives before Caillou finally recovered. He was full of energy and vitality, his eyes emitting a terrifying light and murderous aura. Scent pound. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi helplessly stared at each other. The two looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. The demons were not afraid of death and would rather sacrifice their lives to help Caillou. This was something they could not stop. Tian Chanzi simply gave up on entangling with Saint King. Saint King also did not chase after him. Although his heart ached, his eyes were filled with pride. He looked at Tian Chanzi in ridicule and said, "Do you think the demons are all afraid of death? Let me tell you, for the sake of the demons' great cause, anyone can be sacrificed." Tian Chanzi coldly snorted and did not argue with him. The facts were indisputable. "What do we do?" Tian Chanzi looked at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng secretly sighed. Shura and Caillou, who would win and who would lose, was still unknown. They could only wait and see. Tian Chanzi understood Tang Zheng's meaning and chose to remain silent. "Shura, get out of my body." Caillou roared, his entire body erupting with an earth-shattering aura. Rays of light shone and sword chi soared into the sky. It was like a divine sword, causing people to tremble. Puff puff puff, a series of yin chi retreated from Caillou's body. The yin chi tried to enter again, But Caillou's body was like an iron wall, unable to move forward. This was the result of Caillou activating his true chi to seal all the openings in his body, building the strongest great wall, blocking the yin chi outside his body. Looking at the yin chi that was rushing left and right, Caillou's face revealed a relaxed expression. He disdainfully said, "Shura, you are only SOSO. Watch me destroy you today." With that said, the War Soul sword flew out from his body and steadily landed in Caillou's palm. Caillou stood proudly with his sword in hand like a god of war. Shua. The War Soul sword descended and struck the yin chi with lightning speed. The yin energy hurriedly retreated like a receding tide. Caillou chased after it and quickly swung his sword a few more times, forcing the yin chi to retreat far away. Now you know what fear is. Caillou was immensely pleased with himself as he laughed maniacally. The yin chi retreated with a whoosh, only stopping when it reached the trunk of the tree of life. Then, it changed its form. Caillou's pupils constricted, and his expression changed slightly. "Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve?" The yin chi stabilized and turned into the appearance of a human. This was a miniature version of the Shura, completely different from the previous Colossus. It was about the same height as a real person, but its eyes were less muddle-headed and more intelligent. Tang Zheng looked at this scene in disbelief. He never thought that the Azura could actually become like this. In the past, the Azura were all huge monsters. Very powerful. The Shura stretched out his slender finger and pointed at Caillou. His words were filled with killing intent, but he seemed to be stuttering. "You can actually speak." Caillou was shocked. In the past, Shura had always been shouting and shouting, but he had never spoken a complete sentence. But now, he could actually speak human language, no different from a normal person. Tang Zheng also looked at the Shura in surprise and muttered to himself, "The Shura has changed. What is going on? Look at his eyes, there is actually the light of wisdom. He is not a machine that only knows how to kill." He was very clear about the Shura's situation, but the current Shura was too unfamiliar. Not only had his body undergone a huge change, but he was also shining with wisdom. What was the reason for all these changes? Could it be that the battle with Caillou had caused such a change? Looking at Caillou's reaction, it was obvious that he did not know what was going on. Tang Zheng could not help but feel a little disappointed. Of course. I can speak." Facing Caillou's question, the Shura stammered as he replied. Caillou suddenly turned his head to look at Tang Zheng and found that his reaction was similar to his own. He understood that all these changes were not because of Tang Zheng, but he could not figure it out, so he temporarily gave up the idea of using his brain cells and said, "So what if you can speak? You are still not my match." "Ha! Ha!" The Shura let out a short burst of disdainful laughter. His eyes were cold. It was obvious that he was refuting Caillou. Caillou frowned and directly used his actions to speak. The War Soul in his hand exploded with a resplendent sword light and flew towards the Shura. A cold light flashed in the Shura's eyes. With a point of his finger, the Azura saber also flew up. It was obvious that the Azura saber was also very large, but now it had become the size of an ordinary sword. When the Azura saber flew out, a terrifying yin chi that caused people to tremble in fear was emitted from the Azura saber. Aoo, the sound of ghosts wailing and wolves howling rang out. A burst of pitch-black yin chi rose up from the Azura saber and immediately transformed into a huge ghost head. It was incomparably ferocious. Wherever it passed, the temperature of the air would plummet and the cold wind would blow. If an ordinary person saw this scene, they would be scared out of their wits. However, Caillou was not afraid at all. The power of the War Soul sword increased sharply. In an instant, the sword and blade collided. There were no sparks. Under the cover of such a strong yin chi, even sparks could not be shot out. The ferocious ghost head opened its mouth and bit onto the War Soul sword. The powerful yin chi wrapped around the War Soul sword and the War Soul sword began to buzz and tremble. "Sword Soul, leave the sword!" Caillou roared loudly. The War Soul sword also let out a high-pitched cry, as if it was responding to him. With a flash of light, a figure rushed out from the War Soul sword. It also opened its mouth and bit onto the ghost head. Immediately, the two sides fought back and forth, desperately biting and tearing at each other. Tang Zheng's eyeballs almost popped out because the figure that flew out from the War Soul Sword was the War Soul. Back then, he had subdued the martyr's soul in Ordinary Balance's unmarked graveyard. This was also the origin of the War Soul Sword's name. However, after the Sword Soul and the War Soul Sword merged, the War Soul was replaced by the Sword Soul and never appeared again. At this moment, Caillou actually summoned the Sword Soul and fought fiercely with the ghost head. This opened Tang Zheng's eyes and he had an idea. Could it be that the artifact spirit also left the magic treasure to fight? He had never thought about this before. At this moment, he was suddenly enlightened and asked, "Inner demons, can the artifact spirit be separated from the magic treasure?" "Of course you can, but only when you reach the grade of sacred artifact or above can you do this." The inner demons replied without any surprise. "Why didn't you tell me before? You didn't ask." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes speechlessly. However, ordinary people don't have this ability. Even if they have a sacred artifact, it's not that easy to do this. The master must reach a high degree of compatibility with the magic treasure to be able to do this. Especially the higher the master's cultivation, the higher the grade of the magic treasure, and the further the artifact spirit can be away from the magic treasure. The inner demons explained. Chapter 1170. The Sword Soul and the Ghost Head fought wantonly. Yin Qi and Sword Qi danced in the air and soared up, causing the Tree of Life to scatter countless branches and leaves. The trunk was riddled with holes and juice flowed out, as if the Tree of Life was crying. This caused Tang Zheng to shake his head. This was not the way to go on. Caillou and the Azura had yet to determine a victor, and the Tree of Life was the first to be affected. "Saber Soul, kill!" The Azura roared with killing intent. His voice was even more straightforward than before, as if he was adapting to speaking and becoming more proficient. The Azura was like a baby, gradually evolving from babbling. It was unknown what level he would reach in the end. The two words Saber Soul were obviously the name of the ghost head. The War Soul Sword's artifact spirit was called Sword Soul, and the Azura Saber's artifact spirit was called Saber Soul. The Sword Soul and the Saber Soul had met their opponents and were locked in a stalemate. The Tree of Life is too dangerous. I'll go protect the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng decided that he could not sit still and wait for death. In a flash, he arrived in front of the Tree of Life. Streams of Yin Qi and Sword Qi surged over like a tide. He hurriedly cast a spell in an attempt to block them, but the battle between the Sword Soul and the Saber Soul was too intense. For a moment, he was like a small boat drifting in the sea, bobbing and sinking, extremely dangerous. "Five-clawed golden dragon, hurry up and help me," Tang Zheng shouted. Previously, the five-clawed golden dragon had been indifferent, but now, he could not help but summon it. The five-clawed golden dragon was lazy and uninterested in the battle. He said listlessly, "They haven't decided the victor yet. What's the hurry?" Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and said sternly, "Are you going to help or not?" The five-clawed golden dragon's heart trembled, knowing that Tang Zheng was about to flip out. He compromised and said, "Of course I'll help. Why are you so fierce?" Tang Zheng's arm flickered with a golden light. The five-clawed golden dragon tattoo was lifelike and was about to soar into the sky. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew from above his head, causing him to feel as if he was bathing in the spring breeze. What happened? Tang Zheng understood that there was definitely something fishy and hurriedly raised his head to look. A green light leaped into his eyes and the leaves rustled as a branch drooped down. It seemed to be a large hand that lightly waved at Tang Zheng as if it was waving at him. Tang Zheng rubbed his eyes, thinking that he was seeing things. But when he opened his eyes, he was sure that he wasn't seeing things. There really was a branch on the Tree of Life. The branch extended from his side, and a green light spread out from the branch, enveloping Tang Zheng. A powerful spiritual energy rushed from the top of his head into his brain. His whole body quivered, and the exhaustion of the previous battle and the consumption of his true qi were swept away. A feeling of good fortune struck his heart, and his true qi rushed up with whooshing sounds. Boom! Suddenly, there seemed to be a bomb exploding in his brain. His true qi rushed into Yuanying like a tide. Yuanying opened her eyes, which were as bright as stars. Yuanying's body became more three-dimensional. Her bones cracked and grew rapidly. Even hair grew out of Yuanying's skin. Yuanying is evolving. Tang Zheng was overjoyed, but he quickly suppressed his surprise and circulated the ancient clear heaven scroll, guiding the flow of true qi. Second grade of the divine transformation realm. After a while, he was stunned and only wanted to shout and cheer. He actually broke through at this time. Without a doubt, this was the effect of the Tree of Life. The green light emitted by the branch was filled with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This was the Tree of Life helping him. Could it be that the Tree of Life also had a consciousness? His conjecture was immediately confirmed. After the branch went around him, it came to the front of the sword soul and the saber soul. The green light enveloped them in an instant, and the two sides that were in a deadlock trembled violently. The saber soul's ferocious face calmed down a bit, and the sword soul's sword chi also decreased sharply. Azura and Kai Yu were shocked at the same time. They stared at the branch without blinking. They were the ones involved and had the most profound experience. When the green light of the branch enveloped the sword soul and the saber soul, their hearts shook violently. They felt as if their magic weapons were about to leave them, and the connection between them became weak. Is the Tree of Life fighting back? Tang Zheng muttered to himself. Originally, he had always thought that although the Tree of Life was alive and significant, it would not fight back like a human. It would only passively take a beating. Now it seemed that his understanding of the Tree of Life was still too little. Of course it's fighting back. The inner demons answered his question. The Tree of Life is a symbol of the big world. In ancient times, the Tree of Life existed. It was protected by various forces and accepted people's worship. It's just that the Tree of Life did not show its attacking ability, but everyone knows that the Tree of Life is not without the ability to protect itself. Tang Zheng suddenly understood. He looked up at the Tree of Life. The leaves were still rustling and green. It seemed that in the blink of an eye, the Tree of Life gave him a completely different feeling. The wounds on the Tree of Life were healing little by little. The juice that flowed out seeped through the surface of the bark. Even the branches and leaves that fell on the ground slowly rose into the air and flew back to the tree. It was as if time was flowing backward. When the return button was pressed, everything was moving backward. Only the green light of the Tree of Life was particularly dazzling, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone looked at all this in a daze. For a moment, they were at a loss. Tian Chanzi suddenly realized something, and his eyes showed joy. He knew very little about the Tree of Life. In his era, not many people knew about the Tree of Life. As for the whereabouts of the Tree of Life, it was a big secret. Caillou's expression became serious. He snorted coldly. With a thought, he actually forcefully summoned back the sword spirit. The sword spirit swayed and trembled as it returned to the war soul sword. Caillou's face sank. He had already sensed that the sword spirit was injured. This injury did not come from the Shura, but from the Tree of Life. Damn it, I actually ignored it. After tens of thousands of years, my memory is not good. Caillou said hatefully. The Shura knew nothing about the Tree of Life. When he also summoned back the sword spirit, he discovered that the sword spirit was injured. He roared at the Tree of Life with a sinister expression. Although the Shura had a bit of intelligence, he was not much different from a naughty child. He was not as meticulous and shrewd as Caillou. However, the Shura was still rational. After seeing the power of the Tree of Life, he understood that it was not a good thing. Out of the most instinctive reaction, he did not rush forward to fight against the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng stared blankly at the battle that had ended just like that. He actually felt that it was unreal. Suddenly, a thought popped up from the bottom of his heart. The Tree of Life was so powerful that it could even calm the battle between the Shura and Caillou. Then, how did the Tree of Life wither and die and then disappear? What kind of power caused all of this? Inner demons, do you know the answer? He could not help but ask. When I was trapped, the Tree of Life was still alive and well. How could I know? Tang Zheng was a little disappointed and did not ask any more questions. If the Tree of Life takes action, Then it won't be my turn. The five-clawed golden dragon said happily. Tang Zheng was too lazy to pay attention to the five-clawed golden dragon. He stared intently at Caillou and the Shura. He did not know what these two were going to do. Caillou fiercely glared at the Shura, then unwillingly looked at the tree of life. The green branches stood tall, facing Caillou. It was as if the two of them were looking at each other, their invisible auras clashing. Fine, since the tree of life intervened, then I will let you go. In the end, Caillou helplessly said. The Shura did not answer him. The murderous intent in his eyes was still burning. It seemed that he still wanted to fight with Caillou for 300 rounds. He must decide the victor. Caillou saw through the Shura's thoughts and jokingly said, with the tree of life intervening, you can't fight even if you want to. Rest assured, next time I will definitely decide the victor between us. At that time, it will be the time of your death. The Shura coldly snorted, silently rebuking Caillou. Caillou then turned to Tang Zheng. He meaningfully said, Tang Zheng, you and I are both celestials, and I have also been residing in your body for a period of time. This can also be considered fate. Today, I have taken away a portion of the Heaven-Earth Shen stone, so you will not be able to reconstruct the stairway to heaven. So I will let you go first. It can be considered ending our past fate. You should look forward to seeing me a bit later, because then you will be able to live a bit longer. Tang Zheng had not thought that Caillou would give up so easily. He had not expected the Tree of Life's interference to be so strong. In the face of Caillou's threat, Tang Zheng was not the slightest bit afraid. He only regretted that he had come specifically for the Heaven-Earth Shen stone, but in the end, he had not succeeded. He had allowed Caillou to successfully take away a portion of the Heaven-Earth Shen stone. As long as he was missing a piece of Heaven-Earth Shen stone, he would not be able to reconstruct the stairway to heaven. This was equivalent to his hopes of reconstructing the stairway to heaven being destroyed. He felt very regretful, but there was nothing he could do. He could only glare hatefully at Caillou. Caillou was indifferent. He looked deeply at the Tree of Life and said, "You actually helped this stinking brat. I will let you understand that your choice was completely wrong." Everyone looked at the Tree of Life in astonishment. They did not know what Caillou meant by choice. Why did it choose Tang Zheng? Could it be that it was to protect him? Caillou did not explain clearly, so they could not ask further. The branches flickered with a green light and swayed with the wind, as if they were silently refuting Caillou. Caillou understood the Tree of Life's meaning. His expression became even more unfriendly as he said, "Tang Zheng, you better hide well. In this world, not only me, but those old subordinates of the Yellow Emperor will also not let you go. Those golden crow from before, were you the one who shot it down, right?" Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. Caillou did not see it with his own eyes, but he could also guess this point. However, Caillou's words caused Tang Zheng's heart to sink. He was right. Whether it was Caillou or the old subordinates of the Yellow Emperor, they would all see him as a thorn in their side. Just how did he get along? How did he offend these two people who were like fire and water at the same time? If he had the chance to go back on his word, would he still do this? He pondered for a moment and gave a negative answer. Chapter 1171. Caillou flicked his sleeves and left, taking all the demons with him. Tang Zheng didn't stop him. It was impossible to completely keep them here, so there was no need to continue to tangle with them. The Shura looked deeply at Caillou and frowned, but he didn't jump out. The Shura wasn't like before, who only knew how to kill. He now had a trace of intelligence and understood that it would be extremely difficult for him to get rid of Caillou. Watching the demons leave, the atmosphere was heavy. Tang Zheng said in a deep voice, "The next time we meet, it will be either you die or I die." Tian Chanzi let out a long sigh of relief and said without any surprise, "Caillou was right about one thing. Right now, you are surrounded by enemies and are making enemies everywhere. This isn't a good thing for you." Tang Zheng smiled coldly and said unconcernedly, "So what? Although this wasn't my original intention, I don't regret it in the slightest." Tian Chanzi stared at Tang Zheng and understood his intentions. He nodded heavily and didn't say anything else. Suddenly, Tian Chanzi's gaze turned and fell on the Shura. Shua. The Shura's gaze quickly met with Tian Chanzi's. When their eyes met, it seemed as if there were invisible sparks flying. What about him? Tian Chanzi asked curiously. Tang Zheng also subconsciously looked at Caillou and said, the Shura is completely different from before. Something must have happened that no one knows about. Tian Chanzi nodded in agreement. The Shura looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated expression. He coldly snorted and turned to leave. Stop! Tang Zheng hurriedly shouted to stop him. Although the Shura had intelligence, he was still a great killing machine, especially to ordinary people. He was a huge threat. If he was allowed to leave openly, it would definitely lead to chaos and many innocent people would die at his hands. Tang Zheng naturally wouldn't sit idly by. Moreover, the Shura was given to him by the Dezang of Gugurio. If he watched the Shura leave, how would he explain it to the Dezang of Gugurio? Shura stopped, turned his head, and stared at Tang Zheng with an unfriendly expression. Azura's face couldn't be considered handsome to begin with. In fact, it was even somewhat sinister. Therefore, when he glared at Tang Zheng with his large eyes, it was especially frightening. Tang Zheng faced the Azura without the slightest bit of fear, nor did he have any intention of retreating. You want to stop me? Azura coldly asked. Yes. I can't let you leave, Tang Zheng said truthfully. You have already left. None of you are my match. What ability do you have to keep me here? Azura asked disdainfully. The Shura's language ability had improved a lot compared to before. He actually didn't stutter when speaking, which made Tang Zheng's mood even more heavy. Obviously, the Shura's rapid evolution was not necessarily a good thing. I could suppress you in the past. Can't I now? Tang Zheng could still feel the strong yin qi and killing intent on the Shura's body, so he was still very confident in the Kshitigarbha Sutra. That was why he was so fearless. The Shura's expression suddenly changed. It was as sinister as a ghost's head. The Shura blade suddenly lit up with a resplendent light. The blade soul also flew out and circled around the Shura blade, emitting a terrifying and evil power. I don't remember what happened in the past, but if you dare to go against me now, I will definitely make you regret it. The Shura's feelings towards Tang Zheng were very complicated. There was an instinctive reverence that seemed to be deep in his bones and could not be removed. However, it was obvious that the opponent's strength was not high. Therefore, the Shura did not know where Tang Zheng's confidence came from. As for the words of suppression, the Shura was even more confused. After the Shura's intelligence increased, he could not remember the past. Therefore, he had no impression of the Kshitigarbha Sutra or Tang Zheng. Although the Shura was full of confidence, Tang Zheng did not shrink back. Instead, he took a step forward and looked at the Shura with a burning gaze. Then you can try. Shua. The Shura did not say another word. He slashed his blade towards Tang Zheng's neck. This slash was strong enough to split stone. If it hit, then Tang Zheng would definitely die. There was no way to save the situation. Tian Chanzi's strength was lower than the Shura's, so when he saw this sudden slash, he was so scared that his whole body trembled. He tried to stop it, but it was too late. He could only see the terrifying blade-light slash towards Tang Zheng. Dodge! Tian Chanzi screamed to remind him. Tang Zheng did not move. Perhaps he was confused, but he opened his mouth and a golden Sanskrit character flew out from his mouth. A quiet and peaceful power was emitted from the Sanskrit character. This was the first time Tian Chanzi had seen the effect of the Kshitigarbha Sutra. His whole body trembled as he stared at the Sanskrit character. With his cultivation and experience, he could naturally see that the golden Sanskrit character was extraordinary. It was no wonder that it could suppress the Shura. However, Tian Chanzi and Tang Zheng had the same worry. That was, would the golden Sanskrit character still work? The answer was immediately revealed. Golden Sanskrit characters flew out from Tang Zheng's mouth and flew in front of the Shura. Then, like a giant net, they covered the Shura from head to toe. The Shura grimaced and stared fiercely at Tang Zheng. He shouted, "What kind of magic is this?" "The Kshitigarbha Sutra," Tang Zheng said decisively. He was surprised that the Shura's memory was blank. He didn't even know the Ksitagarbha Sutra. There's nothing strange about this. The Shora's condition will cause him to forget his past memories. In the past, his intelligence didn't increase. He's like a baby. When he grows up, he won't be able to remember clearly. The inner demons suddenly said. Tang Zheng was slightly stunned. Then he understood. So that's how it is. Then there's nothing to worry about. No wonder the Shora was so fearless. It seems that he didn't know the Ksitagarbha Sutra's restraining effect on him. Then let him have a taste of it. What is the Ksitagarbha Sutra? The Shora didn't know the Ksitagarbha Sutra. Tang Zheng sneered. His confidence increased. He said, "You'll know once you try." Tang Zheng immediately chanted the Ksitagarbha Sutra. In an instant, more and more golden Sanskrit characters appeared. They completely covered the Shora's body like a layer of golden clothing. Hoo. The Shora clearly felt the danger. He started to make a big fuss. His face became more and more sinister. His body moved chaotically as he tried to break free from the Ksitagarbha Sutra's attack. How could Tang Zheng let him do as he wished? He quickly activated the Ksitagarbha Sutra. Golden light shined and dyed the surroundings gold. Even the branches and leaves of the Tree of Life were not spared. The Shora continuously waved the War Spirit Sword in his hand. The War Spirit Sword's power opened up a few cracks on the ground. They were so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. Waves of cold air seeped out from the cracks. Tang Zheng ignored it. He activated the Ksitagarbha Sutra without any distracting thoughts. The Shora's struggle became weaker and weaker. Putong. The Shora's legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. His sinister face had an additional trace of reverence. He quickly shook his head. Stop chanting. Stop chanting. Tang Zheng finally stopped. He looked at the Shora cautiously and said, "Now you know the power of the Ksitagarbha Sutra?" The Shora hurriedly nodded his head. He no longer had the confidence and arrogance from before. He subconsciously understood where the reverence he had for Tang Zheng came from. It was definitely the Ksitagarbha Sutra. It was just that he didn't remember the past. Naturally, he didn't know the origin of the Ksitagarbha Sutra. He subconsciously thought that it was a sacred art created by Tang Zheng. Immediately, he became even more reverent towards Tang Zheng. To be able to create a technique to suppress him, this was definitely not simple. The way he looked at Tang Zheng changed. Many emotions intertwined together. If you listen to me obediently, I won't use the Ksitagarbha Sutra to suppress you. Tang Zheng said. The Shora was about to compromise when he discovered that a light flashed in his mind. A new area in his brain was opened up. He felt that his intelligence had clearly increased. The Shora's eyes widened in surprise. With his not-so-high intelligence, he began to think. Why did his brain suddenly change? Could it be the Ksitagarbha Sutra? He couldn't figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. Suddenly, an idea came to him. His expression became fierce and arrogant. He fiercely glared at Tang Zheng and said, "I won't listen to you. I, the Shora, am indomitable. How could I listen to you?" Tang Zheng frowned. He originally thought that the Shora would calm down a bit after suffering. He didn't expect him to be so arrogant. Then he couldn't be blamed for being ruthless. The Shora was born from the evil yin qi of the 9 layers of hell. He had a violent personality. Tang Zheng naturally wouldn't show him any mercy. Therefore, with a thought, he immediately chanted the Ksitagarbha Sutra. The golden Sanskrit words blurted out and enveloped the Shora. The Shora screamed. It was extremely terrifying. However, there was a glimmer of light in the depths of his eyes. This was because he felt the changes in his brain. His brain was being developed bit by bit. He guessed right. Although the Ksitagarbha Sutra caused him great pain, it was also extremely beneficial to him. It could actually develop his brain and make him smarter and smarter. He was overjoyed and unconsciously revealed it. Tang Zheng was as thin as a strand of hair. He immediately discovered the Shora's abnormality. Logically speaking, the Shora should be in great pain. However, at this moment, there was a trace of craftiness in his eyes. There was definitely something fishy going on. Seeing Tang Jing stop chanting the Kshitigarbha Sutra, the Shura was greatly disappointed. His face twisted. He then provoked, "Is that all you've got? It's only SOSO. Tang Jing didn't immediately fall for it. He looked at the Shura curiously and asked, "Could it be that you're really not afraid of pain? This bit of pain is only scratching an itch." The Shura snorted. Tang Zheng, however, didn't think much of it and said, "Your ability to lie isn't that great." A trace of panic flashed through the Shura's eyes. This was caught by Tang Zheng. This caused him to become suspicious. His face was ashen as he asked, "Shura, what are you hiding?" The Shura didn't say a word. It was as if he believed that if he didn't speak, there wouldn't be any loopholes. His brain was developed and his intelligence increased. However, he was still too simple. He couldn't be compared to Tang Zheng. Therefore, this childlike reaction exposed him even more. Not only Tang Zheng, but even Tian Chanzi also realized that something was fishy. He stared straight at the Shura and said thoughtfully, "He seems to be deliberately provoking you." Tang Zheng nodded. He also had this feeling. However, what was the Shura's purpose in provoking him? The Kshitigarbha Sutra. Chapter 1172. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi both thought of the Kshitigarbha Sutra. This was because Shura had been trying to provoke Tang Zheng into reciting the Kshitigarbha Sutra. This abnormal behavior was too eye-catching. Plus or minus pinnacle novel, why do you want me to recite the Kshitigarbha Sutra? Tang Zheng's expression was stern as he asked Azura. Logically speaking, the Azura should be afraid of the Kshitigarbha Sutra. After all, the Kshitigarbha Sutra could suppress him and bring him pain. But he had deliberately provoked him repeatedly. This was too unexpected. Shura panicked as if he had been exposed. He hurriedly said perfunctorily, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "Hehe, you actually know how to deny it. Your IQ is increasing very quickly," Tian Chanzi said jokingly. IQ? Tang Zheng's head twitched as an idea flashed through his mind. The fact that the Azura had gained intelligence was already very strange. Could it be related to the Kshitigarbha Sutra? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was a possibility. The Kshitigarbha Sutra was extraordinary. Perhaps it really did have the effect of opening one's wisdom. Otherwise, why would the Azura spend so much effort to provoke him? Tang Zheng's expression turned serious. He stared at the Azura and asked, "Azura, did you gain intelligence because of the Kshitigarbha Sutra?" Shura's eyes flashed with panic. He looked around and said with a red face, "Nonsense." Seeing the Azura's reaction, Tang Zheng was able to confirm his own guess, his eyes becoming deep and profound as he swept his gaze over the Azura and said, "Azura, your words have revealed your true heart. It seems like my guess was not wrong. The Kshitigarbha Sutra has indeed opened up your wisdom." Back then, Dezang of Gugurio did not mention this, which means that this might be an unexpected surprise. A few images flashed through Shura's mind. It was the image of Dezang of Gugurio suppressing him. It was deeply etched in his mind. Even though his consciousness was muddled in the past, he could not completely forget it now that he had gained intelligence. Dezang of Gugurio. Shura's eyes flashed with hatred. Gritting his teeth, he could not wait to challenge Dezang of Gugurio to a duel. "Do you still want to provoke Dezang of Gugurio? With your strength, you're not his match at all," Tang Zheng said mercilessly. "Nonsense, I will definitely defeat him." Shura subconsciously understood how powerful Dezang of Gugurio was, but he was unwilling to admit it. He roared in exasperation. "The more you shout, the more it shows that you are guilty. There is a huge gap between you and Dezang of Gugurio. There is no comparison at all," Tang Zheng coldly mocked. "You! I'm going to kill you." The Shura roared and rushed towards Tang Zheng. Although he had unlocked his intelligence, there was a limit to his shrewdness. If there was a disagreement, he would start a fight. Tang Zheng had no choice but to chant the Kshitigarbha Sutra. Shura knelt on the ground with a plop, holding his head with both hands. He was in great pain, but his eyes revealed joy. Tang Zheng's head trembled. He understood that this was not the way to go. If he continued to use the Kshitigarbha Sutra to suppress the Shura, it would definitely make him smarter. But if he did not use the Kshitigarbha Sutra, he had no other choice. This was a paradox that caused him to be in a dilemma. Come in. In the end, Tang Zheng still had no other choice. He could only activate Sumeru Heaven and take Shura in. But he continued to chant the Kshitigarbha Sutra to suppress him. Finally, Shura calmed down and became quiet. Tian Chanzi looked at this scene and said worriedly, although you have temporarily suppressed Shura, you have no choice but to use the Kshitigarbha Sutra. His intelligence is increasing day by day. In the future, you may not be able to suppress him. How could Tang Zheng not know this point? It was just that he had no other choice. He could only bitterly smile. The two looked at each other speechlessly. In the end, Tang Zheng shrugged and said, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Right now, he can't make any big waves. Let's just leave it at that for now. Saying this, he raised his head and looked at the tender green branch in the air. He said thoughtfully, Caillou said before that the tree of life chose me. What did that mean? Tian Chanzi heard this and raised his eyebrows. He also said in surprise, this is indeed strange. The tree of life took the initiative to attack and beat back Caillou. This is thought-provoking. Tang Zheng looked at the tree of life in a daze and sighed, yes, before we only thought that it could improve the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Now it seems that it is far more than that. Tian Chanzi looked pensive. He muttered to himself for a long time and said, in my world, there is very little information about the tree of life. There are only a few words left. But everyone knows the importance of the tree of life to this world. As for the whereabouts of the tree of life, almost no one knows. In that case, you also don't know the meaning of Caillou's words? Tang Zheng asked in disappointment. Tian Chanzi smiled bitterly and nodded, I am not a know-it-all. How can I know everything? But since Caillou said so, then he must know. Tang Zheng's head moved and he quickly asked the inner demons, do you know the meaning of Caillou's words? The inner demons hesitated and said, of course I know. This is not some big secret. Then tell me quickly. The inner demons said embarrassedly, that sentence means that the tree of life has its own consciousness and opinions. It chose to help you and stand on your side. Do you understand? Tang Zheng's head was raised and he asked, you mean the tree of life will choose to stand on my side? You can think of it that way. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and looked up at the tree of life in surprise. He was speechless for a long time. Tree of life, why did you choose to stand on my side? I am the weaker side. He muttered to himself. It seemed that he was asking the tree of life, but it also seemed like he was asking himself. But he had no way to find the answer. Because I was born because of you. A voice suddenly sounded in Tang Zheng's mind. Who is it? Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and almost jumped up. Looking around, he did not see a third person. What's going on? Seeing him turn pale with fright, Heaven Monk quickly asked. Tang Zheng looked at Tian Chanzi in a daze and said embarrassedly, there is an unfamiliar voice in my mind. Unfamiliar voice? Tian Chanzi looked at him suspiciously and listened carefully. But he did not hear a third person's voice. He could not help but look at him in surprise and said, could it be that you have been possessed by something? You are the one who has been possessed. Tang Zheng said angrily. It is me. That voice suddenly sounded again. Tang Zheng's heart trembled and his eyes stared blankly. He subconsciously replied, who are you? The tree of life. What, the tree of life? Tang Zheng's eyes flashed as he stared at the swaying branch. It slowly approached Tang Zheng and finally stopped in front of Tang Zheng. Tian Chanzi also heard Tang Zheng's words and stared at the tree of life in disbelief. His eyes were filled with shock. Tang Zheng actually communicated with the tree of life. This was unheard of and unseen. Tian Chanzi suddenly turned his head to look at Tang Zheng as if he wanted to see some clues from his reaction. But he found that Tang Zheng also had a sluggish expression and was completely at a loss. Why can you talk to me? Tang Zheng asked. Because it was your blood that awakened me. The tree of life said. My blood? Tang Zheng was startled. His thoughts drifted back to the past. At that time, he had been trapped under the dragon group's base. It was completely dark and he had almost died there. But he had coincidentally encountered the tree of life seed. The seed had absorbed his blood and then broke out of the ground. In an instant, it had grown into a towering tree. He had almost forgotten this memory. But after the tree of life mentioned it, scenes flashed through his mind like a movie. Because of my blood, you can communicate with me like this? Tang Zheng asked curiously. Yes, I have your blood in my body, so there is no need to speak. We can communicate with each other. As for other people, they can't hear my voice. The tree of life explained. Tang Zheng nodded and suddenly understood. He asked, Kai, you said you chose me. Is it also because of this? You and Kai, you are both celestials, but the difference between the two of you is like heaven and earth. I naturally chose you. Then why didn't you communicate with me before? I've always been growing. Now that my consciousness has finally formed, I can communicate with you freely. Before, I couldn't, patiently explained the tree of life. Tang Zheng stared at the tree of life. For a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. There were thousands of words he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to start. I know you have many questions. Ask away. As long as I know, I'll definitely tell you. The tree of life seemed to understand Tang Zheng's thoughts. Tang Zheng naturally had many questions. Hearing this, he was delighted. Seeing Tang Zheng's reaction, Tian Chanzi couldn't hear the tree of life's words. He hastily asked, what did the tree of life say? I finally understand why I can communicate with it. Back then, the tree of life was able to grow because it absorbed my blood. Tang Zheng didn't hide anything. Hearing that, Heaven Monk's eyes gradually lit up, and only after a long while did he sigh. This is your opportunity. If not for your blood, the tree of life would not have been able to grow, and there would not have been anything after that. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens, and there is an arrangement in the dark. Will of the heavens? Tang Zheng glanced at the blue sky. He bitterly smiled and shook his head. This was too mysterious. He also didn't understand. It was best to ask the tree of life first. Tree of life, how did you disappear from this world back then? Since you're so powerful, you should have the power to protect yourself, right? Asked Tang Zheng solemnly. The branch nodded, indicating it understood Tang Zheng's question. Then its voice rang out in Tang Zheng's mind. Of course I have the power to protect myself. It's just that the attack I encountered back then was even more powerful. Even if I had the power to protect myself, there was nothing I could do. The tree of life said regretfully. In the end, I had to gather all my power and transform it into a seed. I waited for the right time and the right person to break through the soil and grow. What power? Tang Zheng was shocked. He was very curious. In this world, anyone who could make the tree of life wither and disappear was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. Chapter 1173. Tian Chanzi. Tang Zheng saw this scene and roared, struggling with all his might. Pinnacle novels. He's not dead. The tree of life said, I just don't want another noisy person. Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief and found that Tian Chanzi was indeed still breathing. He stared fiercely at the tree of life and asked, We've worked so hard to protect you and even set up the Great Eight Desolation Formation to ensure your safety, but you treat us like this. Is this how you distinguish between kindness and hatred? The branch drooped down slightly, as if it was ashamed, but it quickly raised its head and said, Of course I distinguish between kindness and hatred. You protected me, so I am naturally grateful to you. But you went against me, so how could I turn a blind eye? Then what do you want? Kill me? Tang Zheng asked with a sneer. Kill? The tree of life's voice was full of doubt. After hesitating for a moment, it denied, Of course I won't kill you. I was born because of you. If I kill you, then wouldn't I be worse than those bad guys in the ghost realm? Tang Zheng's head twitched. From the looks of it, the tree of life abhorred evil, but its intentions were not bad. Its obsession with the world of spirits and souls was due to its experience in the past. In fact, it was still kind at the bottom of its heart. At least, it had no real malice towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng had an idea and advised, in that case, you are also a kind-hearted person. How can you bear to watch the ghost realm disappear completely? Wouldn't those innocent people of the ghost realm have suffered great injustice because of you? The Tree of Life was at a loss for words. Seeing this, Tang Zheng struck while the iron was hot and said, "Promise me, let this world stop after it becomes a big world. Let the two worlds depend on each other, wouldn't that be perfect?" The Tree of Life's breathing quickened again. Suddenly, Tang Zheng felt his entire body loosen. The Tree of Life actually let go of him. The branches rose up high, looking down at Tang Zheng condescendingly, and said, "Without you, I can still find a way, the energy of the ghost realm, come to me." As soon as he finished speaking, a rumbling sound came from the sky. Tang Zheng's head trembled. He had a strange feeling. He quickly looked up at the sky. Above the 9 heavens, in the firmament, a black shadow gradually appeared. Not long after, a large hole appeared. A powerful energy was pouring down from the hole like the water of the 9 heavens, surging and surging, causing people to be unable to breathe. Tang Zheng stared at this scene with his mouth agape. The energy that descended from the sky made him feel a sense of fear, because this energy could almost crush him. It was powerful beyond imagination. "What is going on?" he muttered to himself in a trembling voice. Tian Chanzi had fainted and could not answer his question. The Tree of Life also remained silent and didn't answer. The green slip of paper soared into the sky like a giant sword piercing through the firmament. In an instant, it reached the 9 heavens. At the same time, many people all over the world felt something strange and looked up at the sky. Many people who were far away could not see the strange phenomenon in the sky. However, many powerhouses sensed something from afar. Caillou and the others did not retreat too far. At the edge of the desert, they could clearly see this scene. Everyone stopped. The elites of the Devil Clan were stunned and at a loss. Saint King retracted his gaze and looked at Caillou with a burning gaze. He asked, "Ancestor, what is going on?" Caillou sighed meaningfully. "This day has finally come." "What do you mean?" "This world will completely bid farewell to the small world." Tang Zheng's plan back then was successful. He used the Tree of Life to absorb the energy of the world of spirits and souls and completely turned this world into a big world, thus avoiding destruction, Caillou said in a deep voice. "What? It was promoted to a big world?" Saint King was shocked. This was something he had heard of in bits and pieces, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. Now looking at the scene in the sky, a very shocking feeling hit him in the face, causing him to be at a loss for a moment. Caillou sighed faintly. "Yes, it was promoted to a big world. I have to say, I still admire Tang Zheng for this. Although he is our enemy, he is also a person who cannot be underestimated. He is not worth mentioning compared to you, ancestor," Saint King said flatteringly. Caillou raised the corner of his mouth. It was a faint smile, but he did not comment. If the world of spirits and souls is completely reduced to a small world, will they be willing? Won't the world of spirits and souls start a war with our world? Saint King asked in horror. So this is why Tang Zheng is so extraordinary. He has already obtained the consent of the world of spirits and souls. All this will happen naturally and will not cause the problem you are worried about. Do you understand? Caillou said meaningfully. How is this possible? The world of spirits and souls is not a softie, why would they let it happen? Saint King was incredulous. He felt that this was simply nonsense. Looking at his doubtful eyes, Caillou snorted coldly. He was too lazy to explain more and looked at the sky intently. On Mount Everest, a group of people was searching for the soul of the golden crow scattered everywhere. Suddenly, one of them raised his head and looked into the distance. Then, another person also raised his head and looked into the distance. Suddenly, everyone stopped what they were doing and stopped to look into the distance. They looked at each other and their expressions became complicated. "What is going on?" Liu Wuxin asked in a deep voice. Many people shook their heads because they knew. Mo Xie's eyes were deep and unfathomable. He stared into the distance. It was too far away. Even if his cultivation was superb, he could not see, but he could feel the aura. The terrible energy that could almost destroy the world fell from the sky, causing his heart to sink to the bottom. There seems to be energy from the outside world entering this world. Mo Xie said thoughtfully. Energy from the outside world entering? Liu Wuxin's eyes widened in surprise, not understanding what this sentence meant. They did not know that Tang Zheng used the Tree of Life to absorb the energy of the world of spirits and souls. Otherwise, they would have guessed this point. What should we do? Liu Wuxin asked helplessly. The two of them were speechless and could not figure out the reason. Since their reunion, Mo Xie's leadership position had gradually been established. Although Liu Wuxin was very strong and arrogant, she had to admit that she was still not comparable to Mo Xie. I'll go take a look, Mo Xie said, eager to move. Liu Wuxin wanted to say that he would go as well, but he swallowed his words. Collecting the souls of the golden crows was the most important thing, and they could not afford to waste any time. Because the enemy was in full swing, and they did not have much time left. Okay, then I'll stay. You must be careful, Liu Wuxin reminded. Mo Xie nodded and soared into the sky. Like a gust of wind, she blew into the distant sky. At the same time, the animals between heaven and earth became anxious. In the zoo, the roars of many animals sounded. The monkeys on the rockery jumped up and down, becoming irritable and restless. The tiger in the cage kept scratching the iron dragon with its claws. It opened its bloody mouth and roared at the tourists, scaring them into screaming and retreating. The python stood up high, spitting out its scarlet tongue. Its pair of eyes emitted a terrifying gaze. Screams were heard everywhere in the zoo. Not only these animals, but almost all the people and animals seemed to have gone crazy, trying to break out of the cage. The tourists fled in panic. In the streets and alleys, there was a rustling sound from the saws. After a while, huge rats crawled out one by one. They did not seem to be afraid of humans at all. They crawled quickly on the streets with panic in their eyes. The pedestrians were frightened and screamed, jumping up and down. A series of strange scenes played out in China, attracting the attention of many people and causing a lot of panic. In a secret military base in the western suburbs of the capital, Ji Wuxiang was training soldiers and practicing celestial chess. During this period, he had made rapid progress. Soldiers were indeed the best people. They followed orders meticulously, allowing him to make rapid progress. He believed that it would not be long before he could complete celestial chess. At that time, not only would the capital be covered by celestial chess, but the vast world and the vast land of China would be covered by celestial chess. Then, the plan that he had been planning for a long time would come to fruition. He was going to become an unprecedented person. Thinking of this, he was very excited. As for the changes in the outside world, he had heard a little about it, but he chose to ignore it for the time being. Although Kai Yu was resurrected, the Yellow Emperor's former subordinates rose, and the ancient figures in myths and legends reappeared in the world, he believed that as long as he completed celestial chess, these ancient people would not be able to make big waves. He had absolute confidence in his celestial chess. Without any warning, he stopped giving orders, and the tens of thousands of soldiers stopped their movements in unison, looking at him with strange expressions. He raised his head high, frowning as he looked at the distant sky, as if something was firmly attracting him. Granny Li had been following Ji Wuxiang all this time. After noticing his strange behavior, she also frowned and thoughtfully asked, "Lord, I seem to have sensed something." Ji Wuxiang's expression was solemn as he nodded and said, "Your feeling is correct. There is indeed a powerful energy coming from the northwest. This energy can almost destroy the world, making people feel very uneasy." Energy that can destroy the world? Granny Li was shocked, her face somewhat pale. Ever since the Li Palace changed hands, the people around her had either died or left. Granny Li had long since lost her former prestige, and there was a trace of melancholy between her brows. Ji Wuxiang sighed. "Yes, the strength of this energy is extraordinary. If I'm not wrong, this must be the Tree of Life at work. What is the Tree of Life doing?" Ji Wuxiang pondered for a while, then said with a myriad of emotions, "It's transforming the world, making it completely advanced to a large world." He actually knew what Tang Zheng was doing. It had to be said that he was really too powerful. What is a large world? Although Granny Lee was the commander of the Lee Palace, she still did not know about the large and small worlds. She could not help but look at Ji Wuxiang in confusion. Chapter 1174. Granny Lee looked at Ji Wuxiang in confusion and asked curiously, "Honorable Lord, what do you mean by that? Why was there not much time left for them after the world became a world?" Granny Lee was extremely intelligent, but she couldn't figure out the mystery behind this. Once it becomes a world, the cultivators of this world will absorb enough world energy and their cultivation speed will become faster and faster. Their strength will also become more and more powerful. The space for us cultivators to live in will be extremely compressed, and that will be our doomsday, Ji Wuxiang said in a deep voice. Granny Lee's face sank as she nervously asked, "Then shouldn't we fight back?" Ji Wuxiang's lips curved into a faint smile as he said, "Of course we have to fight back. How can we just sit there and wait for death?" Granny Lee looked pensive as she stared at the army that was training hard and tentatively asked, "Could it be that the key to our counterattack is the heavenly chess?" Ji Wuxiang looked at Granny Lee with approval as he said, "You guessed right. As my trusted general, you will witness all of this. This is the birth of a new era, an era that truly belongs to us cultivators." Ji Wuxiang's voice was loud and emotional, arousing Granny Lee's emotions. Her blood surged as she looked at Ji Wuxiang with shining eyes. Although the Honorable Lord's true appearance was much younger than she had expected, it still didn't affect his lofty image in her mind. In order to deceive Tang Zheng, Ji Wuxiang not only deceived Granny Lee, but also used her disciple as a sacrifice. This caused Granny Lee to feel resentment in her heart, but later on, this resentment disappeared and she followed Ji Wuxiang wholeheartedly. Now that Ji Wuxiang had painted a big pie for her, her confidence in Ji Wuxiang increased. She believed that what was lost would be regained, the glory of the Azure Dragon Hall would once again appear in this world, and those who had sacrificed themselves would be remembered forever. In the northwest desert, sand and stones flew everywhere as a strong wind blew, dancing around the tree of life as it soared upwards, as if it wanted to break through the horizon. Above the 9 heavens, the black hole grew bigger and bigger, emitting a terrifying energy. Tang Zheng raised his head and stared at this scene in a daze. His eyes flashed and he finally guessed what was going on. He muttered to himself, "Such a powerful injection of energy, this is the tree of life absorbing a huge amount of energy from the world of spirits and souls. This world will be upgraded." For a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart, because this was the result he had dreamt of and fought for with great difficulty. He had once fantasized about the arrival of this day, and even hoped that it would come as soon as possible. But now that he had truly seen this scene, he had a kind of melancholy. Was what he had done right or wrong? The Tree of Life's obsession was so strong that it would continue to absorb the energy of the world of spirits and souls. Although without his cooperation for the time being, the Tree of Life would not be able to completely absorb the energy of the world of spirits and wipe out the world of spirits and souls. However, there was no guarantee that the Tree of Life would not find other alternatives in the future. The world of spirits and souls was in danger. At this moment of life and death, how could the world of spirits and souls continue to sit idly by and keep Dezang of Gugurio's promise? At that time, the war between the two worlds would be inevitable. No matter who won or lost, it was not the scene he wanted to see. No matter who it was, they would pay a painful price. At this point, his face gradually became gloomy. He stared at this scene, but there was no way to stop it. The energy transmitted from the black hole was too huge. Except for the Tree of Life's ability to absorb it, whether it was him or the Empyrean fairy, he was afraid that there was no way to interfere. Otherwise, they would be in danger of dying. A gust of wind blew in this oasis in the desert, and a tornado blew outside the desert, bringing up sand and dust all over the sky. 9 tornadoes formed by sand and dust wandered around the periphery of this oasis, and even the air seemed to be sucked away by the tornadoes. Cough, cough. A burst of violent coughing sounded. Tian Chanzi climbed up from the ground, rubbed his eyes, and looked at all this in a daze. When he saw the raging tornadoes around him, he was shocked and shouted, "What's going on?" Before he could finish his words, as if someone had grabbed his throat, he suddenly raised his head and stared straight at the sky. This was because he had strongly felt the terrifying energy coming from the sky. His pupils rapidly dilated, and he opened his mouth wide. After a long while, he shouted, "Promotion! This world is finally going to be promoted." He was ecstatic. This was something he had dreamed of. Bang, bang, bang. He actually jumped up and down on the spot, like a lively child who had completed his biggest wish. His eyes were blazing as he looked at the sky, and his eyes were filled with tears. His lips trembled as he said, "This day has finally come, the glory of the cultivators will see the light of day again." He took a deep breath and sighed comfortably. This is the smell, what an abundant spiritual energy of heaven and earth. 1,000 years ago, this world was still a great world. When he was reborn, he found that the world had become extremely strange. Not only was the environment strange, but it was also a kind of feeling, a kind of perception that a cultivator had towards the world. At this moment, he gradually felt a sense of familiarity, and this world was gradually overlapping with the world in his memory. Tang Zheng stared blankly at Tian Chanzi, who was like a completely different person. The other's reaction was far beyond his expectations. Tian Chanzi calmed down after a long time, and realized that he had lost his composure. He turned his head and saw Tang Zheng's blank expression, and bitterly smiled. "I lost my composure, mainly because I was too excited." Tang Zheng didn't understand and asked, "Do you also want to be promoted to a great world?" "Of course, don't you want to be promoted?" Tian Chanzi asked back. Tang Zheng fell into silence, pondered for a while, and asked, "Do you know why I had a falling out with the Tree of Life?" "I was just about to ask you this question." Tian Chanzi looked at Tang Zheng curiously. "Didn't it choose to help you? Why did you turn against each other in the blink of an eye?" Tang Zheng decided not to hide, and truthfully said, "Because it wanted to destroy the world of ghosts, and I didn't agree, so naturally I became its enemy." Tian Chanzi rolled his eyes, looked suspiciously at Tang Zheng, and asked, "Why didn't you agree? A world was destroyed just like that. What's the difference between us and the Devil Race, or the 100 Changing Star Lord? They used the whole island nation as the price to summon back the Devil Race. Do you agree with this move?" Tang Zheng asked. Tian Chanzi was silent. He understood Tang Zheng's thoughts, and said, "You are a person with great love. You can't bear to see the world of ghosts fall into destruction, but have you ever thought about what they did to our world in the past?" Tang Zheng nodded. "Of course I know. Although they absorbed our energy and promoted to a great world, they didn't completely destroy this world, they still left a glimmer of hope, right? But they put us in danger of being destroyed. It's not like you don't know that small worlds are in danger of being destroyed in the long river of history. This is an eternal truth." Heaven Monk retorted. "Of course I understand. If it's for revenge, we can just let the ghost realm be reduced to a small world and ignore it, just like what they did to us back then. Otherwise, a war will break out between the two realms, and at that time, the ones who will suffer will be the people of Dawn." Tang Zheng's emotions became agitated, and he talked non-stop. Tian Chanzi stared at him intently, his expression changing. Finally, he sighed, and said, "You won, you convinced me. A war between the two worlds is not good for anyone. If the world of ghosts agrees with the current situation and no longer causes trouble, then we really don't need to kill them, otherwise, we are not righteous." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He looked at Tian Chanzi happily, and said, "I really didn't misjudge you, I guessed you would agree." Tian Chanzi smiled bitterly. "You brat, you're sure to win." Tang Zheng shook his head, "Because I know you are a good person." "A good person?" Tian Chanzi was stunned for a moment, and then laughed out loud. "Ha ha ha, in life, who hasn't done a few things against their heart, and who can be called a good person? You are still too naive." Tang Zheng did not comment. Rumble. A loud noise came from the sky, interrupting the conversation between the two. The black hole in the sky was getting bigger and bigger, as if a big hole had been broken in the sky, and energy poured down, completely pouring into the Tree of Life. Green light soared into the sky, like a giant umbrella, covering this part of the world. Even the raging tornado was dyed with a layer of green. Suddenly, a phantom image appeared in the black hole. In the phantom image, there were rows upon rows of buildings that looked like ancient city walls. However, even though it was so far away, it still gave off a cold and gloomy feeling. "What is this?" Tian Chanzi exclaimed. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank, and said, "This is the image of the world of ghosts, those are the cities of the world of ghosts." The shadow was like a flickering light, and one city after another appeared. In the world of ghosts, the 10 kings of hell had 10 huge cities, and Tang Zheng even vaguely recognized a few of them. Tian Chanzi, however, saw this scene for the first time, and said with emotion, "It is really not much different from our world, just like our ancient times." Tang Zheng nodded in agreement. "That's right, that's why there are tens of thousands of ghost citizens in the ghost realm. These people are just like the common people in our world. How can we just watch them suffer an undeserved disaster and completely disappear?" Tian Chanzi suddenly understood Tang Zheng's state of mind. Perhaps only after going to the world of ghosts would he have such thoughts, such a kind heart. These phantoms gradually became blurry. Ripples appeared in the sky, spreading out in circles. "Look, there are people." Tian Chanzi suddenly pointed at the black hole and shouted. In the black hole, after the shadows disappeared, there were many more figures, pacing back and forth in the black hole, looking down at the vast desert and the tree of life. Tang Zheng recognized one of them at a glance, and exclaimed, "Dezang of Gugurio." Among those figures, the most conspicuous one was Dezang of Gugurio, who stood at the forefront without sadness or joy. Although there was such a long distance between them, they could still feel the peaceful aura that came from his heart. It was as if with just a glance, one's state of mind would calm down, and even the stormy waves would cease. When Tian Chanzi heard the 3 words Dezang of Gugurio, he was shocked, and stared at the sky, searching for a target, and asked curiously, "Who is Dezang of Gugurio?" "The one in your heart," Tang Zheng replied mysteriously. However, the heaven monk immediately locked onto the Kittigaba Bodhisattva. He did not suspect anything at all and just stared at the Kittigaba Bodhisattva from a distance. Chapter 1175. Tian Chanzi smacked his lips and said, "So, he is the Dezang of Gugurio." From a distance, he couldn't see the specific appearance of the Dezang of Gugurio, but he could feel his unique aura, and this aura was firmly imprinted in the depths of his heart, and he would never forget it for the rest of his life. What about the others? They are the 10 kings of hell. The 10 kings of hell have ruled the ghost realm for thousands of years. Tian Chanzi's gaze turned cold, and he turned to the others, and naturally felt a different aura from them. He increasingly agreed with Tang Zheng's decision. These kings of hell were not ordinary people, and if the 2 worlds were to go to war, it was really unknown who would win and who would lose. In particular, Dezang of Gugurio's cultivation couldn't be seen through at all. If he were to make a move, it would be earth-shattering, and he couldn't predict how serious the consequences would be. Tian Chanzi looked deeply at Tang Zheng, and said, "The ghost realm is powerful, no wonder they could use the 9 nether lightning to kill the tree of life and be promoted to a big world. This is the strength they have accumulated for countless years. Now, although they have been demoted, their strength is still there, and at this moment, it is really not a wise move to be their enemy." Seeing that Tian Chanzi finally figured it out, Tang Zheng smiled with relief. In fact, humans don't know that they have walked on the edge of life and death, and they should thank you. If you hadn't won the trust of the Dezang of Gugurio, the 2 worlds would have gone to war, and the people would have been in a terrible situation, and I don't know how many humans would have lost their lives. Yang Qingyi has always said that you are the savior, and although she later said that her prophecy was wrong, I don't think her prophecy was wrong, and you may really be the savior of this world. Tian Chanzi looked at Tang Zheng with shining eyes, and said unceasingly. Tang Zheng couldn't help laughing, touched his nose, and said, "It's not as mysterious as you say, savior, I'm not that great." "Tang Zheng." A melodious voice suddenly came from the sky. Tang Zheng shuddered and quickly looked up. He saw Dezang of Gugurio walking out of the black hole and floating in the air. Under the scorching sun, he was completely fine. The other Yama kings were still hiding in the black hole, and none of them had crossed the line. The Dezang of Gugurio had come to the human world. At noon, with the scorching sun in the sky, the yang qi was the strongest. For the people of the ghost realm, it was the most dangerous time. As long as they were exposed, they would be injured by the yang qi. Of course, With the cultivation of the 10 kings of hell, it was not to the extent that their souls would be completely scattered after being exposed, but they did not want to be hurt. Dezang of Gugurio was not worried about this at all. When he crossed the line and came to the human world, he was exposed to the scorching sun. The blazing yang qi seemed to be about to penetrate his body. Suddenly, a golden light bloomed from his body, even covering the sun. It was very dazzling. A lotus flower appeared under his feet, quietly carrying him in the air. He was neither sad nor happy. This earth-shattering scene did not seem to cause the slightest ripple in his heart. The leaves of the tree of life rustled and stood up one after another, like pairs of eyes, staring straight at the Dezang of Gugurio. It also heard the conversation between Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi, so it understood that this person was the Dezang of Gugurio, the lord of the ghost realm. It examined the Dezang of Gugurio, as if it wanted to see whether the other party was strong or weak. Dezang of Gugurio glanced at the tree of life indifferently, then shouted at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng rose into the air and responded, Dezang of Gugurio. I have already done what I promised you. Dezang of Gugurio said calmly. Tang Zheng nodded heavily, thank you very much. Without your help, our world would not have been able to be promoted to a big world. Everything has its own destiny. This was taken away from you by the ghost realm in the past, and the ghost realm also suffered the corresponding karma. The 9 underworlds became hell, and countless ghosts became sacrifices. This is the heavenly Tao. Dezang of Gugurio said mysteriously. Tang Zheng heard the words heavenly Tao again. These 2 words were said by the Dezang of Gugurio many times, but Tang Zheng knew very little about the heavenly Tao. This was a mysterious thing, and with his current cultivation, he could not understand it. Dezang of Gugurio would not explain it to him, so he chose to ignore this point for the time being. From now on, the ghost realm and the human world do not owe each other anything. I hope that you will take care of yourselves, manage well, and benefit the common people. Only then will my painstaking efforts not be in vain. Dezang of Gugurio warned. Tang Zheng nodded in agreement, please rest assured. Dezang of Gugurio nodded and took a deep look at the tree of life, saying, it has a different idea. I hope you can persuade it. In many things, too much is as bad as too little. Tang Zheng's head moved. Dezang of Gugurio's cultivation was too terrifying. He could actually see through the tree of life's thoughts. Could it be that he already knew that the tree of life was trying to kill the ghost realm? He can see through me. The tree of life's voice sounded in Tang Zheng's mind. It seemed that it was also very shocked by Dezang of Gugurio's actions. The tree of life could not communicate with the outside world. It could only communicate with Tang Zheng through divine sense. However, Dezang of Gugurio's voice suddenly responded to the tree of life in Tang Zheng's mind. There is nothing in the world that cannot be seen through. As long as you uphold your original heart, a pair of eyes can see through everything. This change caused the tree of life to be at a loss for a moment. It did not know how to respond. Tang Zheng had seen the various magical powers of Dezang of Gugurio, so he was not too surprised. Instead, he was secretly delighted. There was no doubt that Dezang of Gugurio was intimidating the tree of life so that it would not act rashly and have any evil thoughts. Otherwise, Dezang of Gugurio would definitely not sit idly by. The tree of life also understood this meaning. For a moment, it did not know what to think. In any case, it fell into silence. Dezang of Gugurio achieved his goal and turned to leave. Tang Zheng finally met with Dezang of Gugurio and hurriedly called out, Dezang of Gugurio, I still have a question to ask. What question? Azura has intelligence. Do you know what happened? Only Dezang of Gugurio could give him an answer to this question. Intelligence. Dezang of Gugurio was slightly stunned. He turned around and looked at Tang Zheng curiously. Yes, we suspect that he gained intelligence after being suppressed by the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Does the Ksitigarbha Sutra have such an effect? Tang Zheng stared at Dezang of Gugurio with a burning gaze. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was created by Dezang of Gugurio, so he should be the most clear about its effects. Dezang of Gugurio pondered for a moment and said, the Ksitigarbha Sutra was created by me comprehending the heavenly Tao. As for its mysteries, I do not know all of them. What? You do not know all of the mysteries of the Ksitagarbha Sutra? Tang Zheng was shocked. The creator did not fully understand the mysteries of the Ksitagarbha Sutra. Just how magical was this set of Ksitagarbha Sutra? For a moment, Tang Zheng's heart was filled with mixed feelings. Yes, when I passed on the Ksitagarbha Sutra to you, I also hoped that you would be able to understand the mysteries within. Now it seems that my actions at that time were wise. If not for you, perhaps I would not have known that the Ksitagarbha Sutra could unlock the Shura's intelligence. The corners of Dizang of Gugurio's mouth slightly curved up in joy. However, the Shura's nature is cruel. After gaining intelligence, he will definitely not be an ordinary person. His killing intent will not weaken. You must chant the Ksitagarbha Sutra day and night to suppress the Shura and purify his soul. In the end, you must save the Shura and not let him harm the common people. This is the true effect of the Ksitagarbha Sutra. It is a great merit. Do you understand? Dizang of Gugurio earnestly advised. Tang Zheng looked at Dizang of Gugurio with slight astonishment and said, "Can I really save the Shura? You have compassion in your heart, so naturally you can do all this. If you can save the Shura, you will be a Buddha." Dizang of Gugurio said meaningfully. Tang Zheng's head moved. He remembered that Dizang of Gugurio had once made an oath, "If hell is not empty, I swear that I will not become a Buddha." The moment hell was empty, he became a Buddha and directly broke through to the Mahayana realm. Could it be that if he saved the Shura, it would be equivalent to Dizang of Gugurio's achievement? Could he become a Buddha and reach the Mahayana realm? Thinking of the Mahayana realm, the waves in his heart became more turbulent. His eyes flickered, unable to hide his emotions. This little thought did not escape Dizang of Gugurio's eyes. However, he did not clear up Tang Zheng's doubts. Instead, he said meaningfully, "On the road of life, there are many things that you have to experience on your own. Only then can you have a deeper understanding and greater fortune." Tang Zheng thought about it and swallowed the question that was about to come out of his mouth. He said sincerely, "Thank you, Dizang of Gugurio, for your guidance. The Shura has gained wisdom because of you. If the Shura does evil in the future and causes a situation of suffering, this karmic karma will be recorded on your head. So, you must be careful." Dizang of Gugurio warned. Tang Zheng nodded heavily. "I'm leaving." Dizang of Gugurio turned around again. This time, Tang Zheng did not ask him to stay. He stared at his back in a daze. When he walked into the black hole, the golden light on his body quickly disappeared, and he merged into the atmosphere created by the other kings of hell. Tang Zheng could not see the expressions of the kings of hell clearly from afar, but without exception, they did not have good expressions. Their hard work back then was now in vain. No matter who it was, they would not be happy. However, for the sake of his own world, Tang Zheng would not really be soft-hearted and care about their feelings. Boom! With a loud sound, the black hole suddenly shrank. The last wave of majestic energy fell like a torrential rain. Then, the black hole disappeared, and the sky returned to normal. However, a mighty wave of heaven and earth spirit energy completely burst out from the tree of life, soaring into the sky and spreading in all directions at lightning speed. Whoosh! It was raining. There were no clouds in the sky. It was clear and boundless. However, the rain still fell. This rainwater contained a lot of heaven and earth spirit chi, nourishing every inch of the land. The tornado also subsided and turned back into sand that fell to the ground. After being soaked by the rainwater, a little bit of green appeared in the sand, and tender grass grew out of the sand. Chapter 1176. The rain did not stop at the desert, but spread to the divine continent. Not long after, it began to rain inexplicably in the divine continent. The sky was clear for thousands of miles, but it began to rain. This scene was inconceivable. The farther one was from the tree of life, the weaker the effect of the rain falling on the ground. No more grass grew from the ground, but the plants were nourished by the rain. The grass became greener, and the flowers became more beautiful, quietly changing. In the mountains, Many intelligent animals drilled out of their caves, raised their heads, opened their mouths, and swallowed the rain falling from the sky. Their eyes were bright, and their fur became more lustrous. Magical changes were sprouting in their bodies. Tian Chanzi looked at this scene in amazement. The boundless desert had completely turned into an oasis. It was completely different from before, as if it was another world. He could not help but look up at the tree of life and said with emotion, "It's finally advanced to a big world. This is the myriad of phenomena that only a big world can have. All living things are growing, and vitality is flourishing." Tang Zheng could not hide the shock in his eyes. He truly felt the difference of a big world. He took a deep breath, and countless spiritual energy of heaven and earth was sucked into his lungs through his mouth and nose, spreading to his 8 extraordinary meridians. Even the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was seeping into his body through his pores. This was a completely different feeling from before. He was surprised to feel everything that was different. No wonder the ancient cultivators were so powerful. It was not without reason. With such rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth, it was difficult not to increase one's cultivation. He couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement in his heart. Wouldn't his cultivation increase even faster? As soon as this thought appeared, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth seemed to be enlightened. It rushed into his meridians like a river, and his whole body emitted strange sounds. His eyes lit up, and a low roar burst out from the depths of his body and rushed to the sky from his throat. This roar was not a human's voice, but a dragon's roar. The dragon mark on his glabella blossomed with a bright golden light, and a 6-clawed golden dragon flew out of the dragon mark and danced around Tang Zheng's body. In an instant, pieces of glittering golden scales covered Tang Zheng's body. "What's going on?" Tian Chanzi asked in shock. Tang Zheng hurriedly cast a comforting glance and said, "I'm fine, my dragon god arts is about to break through again." Back then, after Tang Zheng absorbed the mysterious dragon soul in the Langya Pavilion, his dragon god secret art had greatly increased, directly breaking through to the 6th layer. The little golden dragon had also grown 6 dragon claws. Later on, he was delayed by various matters and did not go to Langya Pavilion again. At this moment, seeing that the dragon god secret art was on the verge of breaking through, Huang Xiaolong's heart stirred. Once he broke through to the 7th layer, he would definitely make a trip to the Langya Pavilion to explore the situation, especially that mysterious burial chamber. There were too many tombstones inside, and each tombstone contained a soul. Once he absorbed a dragon soul, his dragon god secret art would easily evolve. Even the 5-clawed golden dragon did not know about this matter. If he knew that Tang Zheng had absorbed a dragon soul, he would definitely categorize him with the hated dragon slayer, which would cause Tang Zheng to fall into a passive position. It was precisely because the 5-clawed golden dragon was very disgusted with absorbing dragon souls, so Tang Zheng subconsciously did not want to rely on this method to increase his cultivation. After all, he had an indissoluble bond with the dragon clan. If he wantonly absorbed the dragon souls of the dead seniors of the dragon clan, it would be disrespectful. Tang Zheng was a principled person. There were things that he should do and things that he should not do. Unintentionally absorbing a dragon soul could be forgiven, but if he deliberately absorbed a dragon soul, it would be too despicable. However, he was still very curious about the burial chamber. After all, even the 5-clawed golden dragon did not know of its existence, so he still wanted to explore it clearly. Perhaps there would be an unexpected harvest. Hearing this, Tian Chanzi breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Then be careful, I will protect you." Tang Zheng nodded his head, his mind and body were immersed in the dragon seal, and a strong dragon chi was continuously being produced from the dragon seal. The spirit chi of heaven and earth continuously rushed into the dragon seal, causing the golden light released by the dragon seal to become more and more intense. The 6-clawed golden dragon that was wrapped around Tang Zheng's body raised its head and wagged its tail, exuding a frightening majesty that made people unable to look directly at it. Roar. The little golden dragon raised its head and let out a dragon roar. Its eyes bloomed with golden light, and a small dragon claw gradually grew from its abdomen. Tian Chanzi looked at this scene curiously, unable to hide the shock in his eyes. For the people of Huaxia, dragons were always a very sacred existence, but at this moment, Tang Zheng was like a dragon, making Tian Chanzi have a whole new level of respect for him. This kid's magic is far beyond my imagination. When I first met him, I never thought that he would have a day like this. TSK, my life is really worth it, to have cultivated such a freak. The word freak was not derogatory, but Tian Chanzi could not find an appropriate adjective to describe Tang Zheng. In the distant sky, Missouri Xie suddenly arrived. Just now, he had seen the scene in the sky from afar. The appearance of the Dezang of Gugurio and the 10 kings of hell made him turn pale with fright. He did not know the existence of the Dezang of Gugurio, but he vaguely guessed the identity of this group of people. In particular, he found that these kings of hell were not angry and did not fight back, which was greatly beyond his expectations. The Tree of Life absorbed the energy of the world of spirits and souls, but the 10 kings of hell turned a blind eye to it and did not attack. This did not make sense at all. But soon, he saw a person flying into the sky. His pupils shrank as he recognized that this person was Tang Zheng, his opponent. If it were not for Tang Zheng, the soul of the Golden Crow would not have fallen, and he could directly summon the Yellow Emperor. Because the distance was too far, Mo Xie did not hear the conversation between Tang Zheng and the Dezang of Gugurio, but when he saw the two talking happily, his heart suddenly sank to the bottom. Why was this kid so extraordinary that he even had contact with the world of spirits and souls? The world of spirits and souls did not make a big move, it must be related to Tang Zheng. At this point, Mo Xie was confused again. What ability did he have to be able to persuade the world of spirits and souls? He asked himself honestly, he did not have this ability. Even in ancient times, the Yellow Emperor and the world of spirits and souls lived in peace and did not attack each other. Of course, at that time, the world of spirits and souls was a small world, and it was not strong enough. Therefore, the Yellow Emperor did not pay too much attention to it. But only Mo Xie understood that the world of spirits and souls was not Xiaobai's rabbit, and they would not be trampled on. Especially when it was a matter of the survival of the world of spirits and souls, they would not sit idly by. But after seeing the people from the world of spirits and souls quietly retreat, he had to admit that all this really happened. The world of spirits and souls was demoted, but they did not dare to say anything and just left. This was absolutely not in line with common sense, and it was not in line with the interests of the world of spirits and souls. Mo Xie was resourceful, but he could not figure out the reason behind it even if he scratched his head. Before Mo Xie could recover, he saw the changes in Tang Zheng's body. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and he exclaimed in disbelief, "Dragon, this kid actually has a connection with dragons." In ancient times, dragons were already a species that existed, but to them, dragons were still an extremely powerful existence. Mo Xie had seen a dragon with her own eyes before, but dragons were too mysterious. Their heads could only be seen but not their tails. However, they coexisted peacefully with humans and didn't cause any trouble. In addition, the Yellow Emperor was not afraid of the existence of dragons because of the Golden Crow he raised. The Golden Crow was not weaker than a dragon, and if a dragon really wanted to be an enemy of the Yellow Emperor, then the Golden Crow would definitely not let the dragon have an easy time. For Mo Xie, dragons were a mysterious and powerful existence, which made his heart even more turbulent. His eyes gradually blossomed with light as he stared fixedly at Tang Zheng. Even though they were so far away, he could still feel the powerful dragon qi that was transmitted over. It was an aura that could not be provoked, causing his heart to tremble. He clenched his fists, really wanting to rush up and stop Tang Zheng, but when he saw Tian Chanzi next to him, he forcibly suppressed this thought. Tang Zheng is extraordinary, we must be careful in the future. Liu Wuxin is right, perhaps this is also a huge threat. Mo Xie muttered to himself, his gaze involuntarily drifting into the distance. Vaguely, he saw many figures. Mo Xie's eyes flashed with killing intent. Kaiyu, you've actually been resurrected. Your war with us did not end in the Battle of Zhuolu, but instead continued to this day. You still want to make a comeback, but we won't give you the chance. Just you wait, when the Yellow Emperor is resurrected, it will be the day of your death. Kaiyu's group was too eye-catching. Mo Xie had discovered them despite being far away. Kaiyu had changed his appearance, But it was not difficult for Mo Xie. He had also fought Kaiyu in the past, so he was very familiar with Kaiyu's aura. Even though Kaiyu was ever-changing, Mo Xie could recognize his undisguised aura at a glance. Even Kaiyu retreated in dejection, which means that things are not going well. He didn't get any benefits here. Tang Zheng, you're really not simple. Even Kaiyu can't do anything to you. Mo Xie unwillingly focused his gaze on Tang Zheng. In the end, Mo Xie let out a long sigh, turned around, and went back to discuss countermeasures with Liu Wuxin and the others. Fortunately, he had come all the way here to discover these secrets. Otherwise, he would have misjudged the situation. The scales on Tang Zheng's body became thicker and larger, and the golden light became more and more intense. It was as if he had turned into a dragon. The little golden dragon finally completely grew out its seventh claw. It let out another dragon roar, overjoyed. It shook its head and wagged its tail as it soared into the sky. Wherever it passed, even the air was dyed golden. Even the tree of life was dyed with a layer of golden luster. Tang Zheng's eyes sparkled with golden light as he stared straight at the seven-clawed little golden dragon. He stretched out his hand and shouted, "Come back." The little golden dragon swung its tail, turned around, and swooped down at Tang Zheng, charging straight into Tang Zheng's dragon seal. In an instant, its body was surrounded by a resplendent golden light as a powerful dragon aura soared into the sky. Roar! A dragon roar burst out of Tang Zheng's mouth, forming a powerful shockwave that spread in all directions, causing the leaves to rustle. Chapter 1177. The golden light disappeared, and Tang Zheng returned to his original appearance. His heart was as calm as still water, and his previous excitement calmed down. Of course, he understood the reason for all his changes. His cultivation had previously increased to the second level of the divine transformation realm, and now he had absorbed a large amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. His dragon god secret art had naturally broken through. Looking at the seven-clawed little golden dragon in the dragon seal, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The five-clawed golden dragon's voice sounded in his mind, and said in a complicated tone, "You've broken through again. This dragon god secret art seems to be tailor-made for you. You cultivate much faster than us dragons." The five-clawed golden dragon seemed to be particularly confused about this. "It's all thanks to you for teaching me the dragon god secret art." The five-clawed golden dragon snorted, feeling unhappy. He was branded by Tang Zheng's soul, and that time it also helped him break through the dragon god secret art. Recalling the seven-clawed little golden dragon just now, it thought unhappily, "I've already broken free, and my cultivation is also improving day by day. I believe it won't be long before I can return to my peak state." Perhaps, this was the only thing that could make it slightly gratified. "You can go to the 7th floor of Langya Pavilion. You must have been looking forward to this day for a long time," the five-clawed golden dragon said. Tang Zheng smiled and said, "Of course, the Langya Pavilion is so mysterious, and every time I take a step forward, there will be new discoveries. This is a huge temptation to me, and now I can't wait to go in and take a look." His tone changed, and he said, "However, it's obviously not the time now. We'll talk about it when we get back. You'll definitely have a big surprise," the five-clawed golden dragon said mysteriously. Tang Zheng was stunned and wanted to ask, but seeing that the five-clawed golden dragon was tight-lipped, he dismissed the idea. Since it was a surprise and not a scare, then there was no problem. Moreover, even if it was a scare, he was not afraid. Although there were many dangers in Langya Pavilion, he was not the same as before. With such a powerful strength, he would always have the ability to protect himself. The Tree of Life had been watching Tang Zheng. Seeing his changes, it said in a deep voice, "The great world has successfully advanced, and you have personally experienced the changes. If the ghost realm disappears, then our world will be even more powerful. For you cultivators, cultivation will be faster. Isn't this a good thing?" Clearly, the will of the Tree of Life had not disappeared. Tang Zheng was unmoved. He looked at the Tree of Life indifferently and said, "You've seen the power of the ghost realm before. Do you really want to start a war between the two realms?" Without waiting for the Tree of Life to answer, Tang Zheng shook his head resolutely. I won't mess around with you. The Tree of Life was resentful and helpless. Since you have the ability to protect yourself, then we will take our leave. I hope you will take care of yourself. In the past, Tang Zheng was worried that the Tree of Life would be harmed. After all, Xing Feng had used a device to take away a portion of the sap. But today was different from the past. The Tree of Life's ability to protect itself was more than enough. Unless it was a very powerful expert, the Tree of Life would not be threatened. Whether it was Kai Yu or the old subordinates of the Yellow Emperor, they would not harm the Tree of Life. This was because it was related to the spiritual energy of this great world. Without the Tree of Life, the human world would be reduced to a small world, which would do them more harm than good. The Tree of Life was silent for a moment and said, I hope you can change your mind one day. Tang Zheng snorted and said resolutely, there will be no such day. Seeing Tang Zheng turn around and leave, Heaven Monk looked at the Tree of Life with a complicated expression, and also left. The vast desert turned into a grassland, leaving behind only the towering Tree of Life and this green oasis that was exuding a thriving life force. The two of them saw the entire desert turn into an oasis along the way. Their eyes were filled with shock and they could not help but fall into silence. After walking out of the desert, Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks. With a thought, Yi Dingdang and Fang Shisha simultaneously flew out of the Sumeru world. The two of them had a cautious look on their faces, completely focused, as if they were preparing to fight to the death, but when they saw the lush green scene in front of them, they were stunned at the same time. Where is this? Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily and said, we have retreated to the edge of the desert. Edge of the desert? Yi Dingdang frowned and looked into the distance. How was this a desert? This was clearly an oasis. Fang Shisha also had the same question and said innocently, this is not a desert. The desert no longer exists and has turned into an oasis. The Tree of Life has already turned our world into a large world. After the rain fell, it became like this. Tang Zheng gave a brief introduction. Yi Dingdang and Fang Shisha looked at each other in dismay. They did not think that it would be so miraculous, especially since Yi Dingdang was a cultivator. They could not help but say with some envy, you said that after becoming a large world, this world would be more suitable for cultivators to cultivate and live. Then wouldn't the living space for us cultivators become smaller and smaller? If I had known this earlier, I would not have learned martial arts in the past. Wouldn't it have been better if I had directly cultivated magic like Shisha? Seeing the depressed expression on Yi Dingdang's face, Tang Zheng's head moved. The carefree Yi Dingdang rarely had such a depressed expression. It was obvious that this matter had a great impact on her. Dingdang, don't belittle yourself like this. Didn't Tang Zheng say that? Cultivators can also cultivate to become very powerful and not lose out to cultivators in the slightest. Fang Shisha held her best friend's hand and consoled her. The two of them advanced and retreated together. Their friendship deepened day by day and they had already become very good friends. Yi Dingdang pouted with an embarrassed expression and said with a bitter smile, don't comfort me. In the future, I will definitely not be your opponent. When the time comes, don't bully me. Fang Shisha's expression became cold and said, Dingdang, what are you saying? How could I bully you? No matter what I become, I will always be your best friend. I will protect you and will never bully you. Yi Dingdang was extremely moved and tightly held Fang Shisha's hand. Cough cough. Tang Zheng coughed and interrupted the two of them. He looked at them and laughed involuntarily, saying, with a man like me here, who would dare bully you? You are my women. If anyone dares to bully you, I will beat them until their mother can't recognize them. This was the first time Tang Zheng had revealed his identity to the two of them at the same time. Fang Shisha was greatly embarrassed and her beautiful face immediately turned red. She punched Tang Zheng and said coquettishly, you're talking nonsense again. Yi Dingdang glared at Tang Zheng but was not as coquettish. She stood on the same side as Fang Shisha and said, he's just so shameless. Let's ignore him. Seeing that Yi Dingdang had finally walked out of her depressed mood, Tang Zheng let out a sigh of relief. He secretly noted this matter down in his heart. He had many martial artists by his side. If he could not find a good way out for the martial artists, then it would be very troublesome. The cultivators were getting stronger and stronger. It was already an irreversible situation. However, he had to find a way to make the martial artists stronger as well. Only then could the balance be maintained. Moreover, if the martial artists by his side became stronger, then it would be a great help to him. What about the demons in the end? Fang Shisha raised her head and asked curiously. They all left. However, they took away a portion of the heaven and earth magnetite. Therefore, we have no way to rebuild the stairway to heaven. Tang Zheng said disappointedly. Yi Dingdang glared at him and said disappointedly, we came here with untold hardships, but who would have thought that in the end, it would all be for naught? Kaiyu and those people are too hateful. That's right. Kaiyu took over Song Yu's body and fought with us. In the end, because of Shura, he did not gain any advantage. However, their goal was achieved, so they directly left. What? Kaiyu took over Song Yu's body? Yi Dingdang shouted in shock. Yes. Why did Kaiyu take over Song Yu's body? Can't he take over other people's bodies? Yi Dingdang was indignant. She originally thought that she would never see Song Yu's face again. Who would have thought that Kaiyu would take over that body? Wouldn't that mean that she would have to see that face again in the future? Although it was no longer Song Yu, that face had left too many memories in her. Just looking at it made her feel uncomfortable. Kaiyu was forced to take over Song Yu's body. This was not what he wanted. What he wanted the most was my body, but he did not have the ability. Tang Zheng explained. Chimph, he still wants your body. What wishful thinking. When Yi Dingdang heard this, she suddenly felt that compared to taking over Tang Zheng's body, taking over Song Yu's body seemed to be better. What was done was done. No matter what, she had no choice but to accept this reality. She fiercely said, you must think of a way to teach Kaiyu a lesson in the future. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. Only the fearless Yi Dingdang would use this guy to describe Kaiyu. Other people would never dare to do so. After all, Kaiyu's fierce reputation was not something that ordinary people could compare to. It's a pity that my war soul sword was taken away by Kaiyu. He is really too cunning. Purposely using the sword spirit to fuse with the war soul sword is actually burying a nail. Once he summons it, the war soul sword will betray him. This was also one of Tang Zheng's biggest regrets. The war soul sword had accompanied him all the way and witnessed his growth. It was like an inseparable part of him, but now that it had fallen into Kaiyu's hands, it made him feel disappointed and frustrated. The war soul sword has also fallen into Kaiyu's hands. Yi Dingdang and Fang Shisha exclaimed at the same time. They were very clear on what the war soul sword meant to Tang Zheng. Yeah, but it's not a big deal. Tang Zheng pretended to be carefree and said, I still have the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. With that thought, he thought about the matter of the artifact spirit. The sword soul and the blade soul could both leave the magic treasure. Could he summon the artifact spirit of the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows? Once the artifact spirit was drawn out, the magic treasure's attack power would increase greatly. He urgently needed to increase his fighting strength, so this was a way. However, he could only go back and practice it step by step. Although Tang Zheng was calm on the surface, Fang Shisha and Yi Dingdang were very clear on his true feelings. They secretly made up their minds that they would think of a way to take back the war soul sword in the future. Chapter 1178. Tang Zheng's group returned to the capital. Along the way, they saw the changes brought about by the Tree of Life. Ordinary people wouldn't notice much, but they observed in detail and found many clues. The further they went from the Tree of Life, the weaker the miracles brought about by the Tree of Life. However, the vegetation was lush, and the color was much better than before, emitting a kind of spirituality. They even saw some animals in the distance. They were different from ordinary animals, and there was a trace of wisdom in their eyes. Tang Zheng asked Tian Chanzi curiously. Tian Chanzi didn't find it strange, and explained that this was a miracle brought about by the outside world. When the rain fell on the divine great land, whether it was plants or animals, once they were nourished by it, the possibility of them becoming spirits increased greatly. Especially many animals and plants that lived in seclusion deep in the mountains, and were on the verge of becoming spirits, would truly become spirits because of this water. From now on, there would be many more demons on the earth. In the end, Tian Chanzi concluded, this is the outside world. You can slowly experience this new world. There were unknown changes in the world, but for the people in the big city, their lives were still the same. They were not affected by the rain in the slightest. It was just that the air was fresher, and the smog that had plagued the capital for many years had unknowingly disappeared. Looking at the bustling crowd and the crowded streets, Tang Zheng's expression was complicated, and he said meaningfully, I'm afraid that the peaceful lives of these people will never return. Tian Chanzi shook his head and said, you're wrong. The lives of ordinary people won't change much. You haven't lived in ancient times, so you don't know the situation of the outside world. The stronger the strong, the greater the responsibility they have to shoulder. They won't easily disturb the lives of ordinary people. Tian Chanzi frowned and asked, didn't you always say that the big world is a world where the strong preys on the weak? That's for cultivators. The lives of ordinary people are actually very far away from the lives of cultivators, so there's no need to worry too much. The real chaos was in ancient times. Ever since the gradual development of civilization, the order of the world has been established. The real powerhouses will not harm ordinary people. Instead, they will form an invisible alliance to ensure the lives of ordinary people. Tian Chanzi said solemnly, describing another world to Tang Zheng. Is this the duty of the righteous path? Tang Zheng asked thoughtfully. Tian Chanzi looked at him approvingly, as if he was a promising child, and proudly said, of course, this is the duty of the righteous path, to prevent the demons from stirring up trouble, and to protect the peace of the world. At this moment, Tang Zheng couldn't help but have a new understanding of the righteous path. The way the demons did things really made him hate them, especially when they used the mountain river blood sacrifice great array, sacrificing countless lives to achieve their own goals. This kind of ruthless method made Tang Zheng tremble in fear, so he naturally didn't have a good impression of them. Yi Dingdang and Fang Shisha looked at Tang Zheng with eyes full of love, as well as a strong sense of pride. Without a doubt, the responsibility on the shoulders of the person they loved was not small, but which girl didn't love a matchless hero? The few of them returned to the front of the villa. Someone had already been notified, and many people were waiting at the entrance to welcome them. Other than Wu and Empyrean Fairy, the other women were not at home. Their hearts for work were not weak, so in the middle of the day, they were busy with their own work. Seeing them come back safe and sound, Lan Yu quickly walked over and impatiently welcomed them. After she took the pill, her power increased greatly. She was even more grateful to her son, and missed him even more. She thought about him day and night, unable to sleep. Although they had not seen each other for a short period of 10 days, seeing her son, her feelings immediately surged. She looked at him with burning eyes and said, "You're back." Tang Zheng felt her fluctuating emotions and nodded. "Is everything okay at home?" "Everything is fine. How about you?" "I'm fine." Tang Zheng raised his head and saw that everyone was staring at him, so he told everyone to return to the house, especially Empyrean Fairy, who looked at him with a strange gaze. He knew that she felt it more deeply than the others, so she definitely had many questions. Whoosh! Xiao Bai appeared out of nowhere, and with a flash of white light, it jumped onto Tang Zheng's shoulder. It shook its head and kept scratching Tang Zheng's hair. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily and patted the back of its head, stopping it from running amok. The Scarlet Lunar Beast and little Yu Yu also walked out at the same time. The father and son were already very close, walking side by side. Their auras were different, especially little Yu Yu, whose body was shining and her eyes were full of energy. It was obvious that her cultivation had increased by a lot. With the help of the Scarlet Lunar Beast, it was natural for little Yu Yu to increase her cultivation. The Scarlet Lunar Beast looked at Tang Zheng with a flash of surprise. It could also see that Tang Zheng's cultivation had increased, and the aura around his body had changed. It could not help but feel excited. Tang Zheng had brought more and more surprises to it, making it difficult for it to digest. Everyone returned to the living room, and the sorcerer tribe disciples returned to their posts to be on guard. Now that the various forces were mixed and had become a large world, Tang Zheng's protection of this place was even stricter. Naturally, he would not let the sorcerer tribe disciples let down their guard. Tang Dahai was resting in another villa, and did not participate in the discussion. Lan Yu, Wu Junshan, Wu, and the Empyrean fairy focused their attention on Tang Zheng's face. The Empyrean fairy was the first to break the silence. She asked, "Has the tree of life succeeded?" Tang Zheng nodded without hesitation. He knew that he could not hide it from the Empyrean fairy. He said truthfully, "Now, our world has been promoted to a large world." Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at each other, and a flash of sadness appeared in their eyes. They had been taught about the difference between a large world and a small world. They knew that in a large world, cultivators' cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort, and martial artists would decline. Yi Dingdang's heart was filled with sorrow as she saw all of this with her eyes. Without leaving a trace, she nudged Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was slightly stunned as he also discovered some clues. However, he could not do anything and could only remember it in his heart. The Empyrean fairy's face flashed with excitement. With her cultivation and temperament, she had already trained herself to be calm, but this time, her heart could not help but stir. "Then, did your mission go smoothly?" the Empyrean fairy asked curiously. Tang Zheng's expression darkened. He shook his head and said, "We failed." "What, failed?" The others were shocked and pricked up their ears at the same time. "How is that possible?" "It really did fail. Kaiyu brought the demon race here and fought a great battle with us. They took away more than 10 heaven and earth profound stones, so it is impossible for us to reconstruct the stairway to heaven." Tang Zheng explained. Everyone's faces immediately turned pale. This was originally a safety measure left behind, and they did not say that they would use it immediately. However, it was a failure at the last step. In the end, it made everyone feel sad. Seeing that everyone was in low spirits, Tang Zheng coughed. He clapped his hands and said encouragingly, "This is only a small hurdle. We can take big strides forward. Although the demon race is strong, we are not without a way to deal with them." "Oh, what way?" Everyone's interest was aroused. They all raised their heads. On the way back, Tang Zheng thought carefully and thought of a way. This method was very risky, but he had no other choice. The Shura was strong, and was not inferior to Kaiyu. Kaiyu's strength would recover, but the Shura's fighting strength would not stagnate. After unlocking his wisdom, the Shura's strength would increase by leaps and bounds. This was Tang Zheng's judgment. As for whether it would become a reality, it was still unknown. This gave him an idea, and that was to use the Shura to deal with Kaiyu. Together with them and the witch race, it was not necessarily that they did not have the ability to resist. At least, they could stop the advance of the demon race and protect the civilians. This was a last resort. But other than this method, he did not have any better ideas for the time being. As for the emperor's old subordinates, Tang Zheng did not count on them. Although they were the source of the righteous path, they had a lot of grudges with him. They would definitely not let it go. He had to be on guard at all times. The key now was to convince the Shura to cooperate with him. As for making the Shura submit, Tang Zheng did not dare to have extravagant hopes. After all, the Shura was too strong and had a cruel nature. No one else could suppress him. Only his Ksitigaba Sutra could. Seeing everyone looking at him curiously, Tang Zheng revealed the riddle and said, "Shura, Empyrean fairy and the others were suspicious. They did not know that the Shura had unlocked his wisdom." Tian Chanzi had an idea. He looked at Tang Zheng with burning eyes and said, "You want to use the Shura to deal with Kaiyu? Although the Shura has unlocked his wisdom, he does not listen to your orders." The Shura has unlocked his wisdom. Empyrean fairy also knew of the Shura's existence. She understood what kind of existence he was. Hearing that the Shura had unlocked his wisdom, she could not help but open her mouth wide. Yes, the Ksitigaba Sutra has unlocked the Shura's wisdom. Moreover, he is no longer a big deal. He has become a normal person. It's just that his nature is cruel and bloodthirsty. I have suppressed him in the Sumeru world. Tang Zheng briefly explained. Empyrean Fairy was skeptical and asked, "You really think that the Shura can fight against Kaiyu? You should know that Kaiyu is not an ordinary person's strength." As the daughter of the Emperor of Heaven, Empyrean Fairy knew more about Kaiyu than ordinary people. She had also heard the Emperor of Heaven talk about the past and present. Kaiyu was the most ambitious and ruthless person in tens of thousands of years. If he had not met the Yellow Emperor, Kaiyu would have definitely unified the world. At that time, it was unknown what kind of scene it would be. Empyrean Fairy was influenced by what she saw and heard. Naturally, she was in awe of Kaiyu. She could not help but doubt whether Tang Zheng's plan was feasible. Tang Zheng had been with Kaiyu for too long and did not have the same reverence as her. He said disapprovingly, "No matter how strong Kaiyu is, he is still a person. As long as he is a person, he can be defeated. He only needs to find a way and method." The Shura and Kaiyu have already fought a great battle. Kaiyu could not do anything to the Shura. Instead, he almost suffered a double loss, so I think this method can be tried. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,